There are lots of famous mysteries that you can explain now if you carefully study the details. The tragedy of the Titanic, for example. Anyone can recreate a picture of that night and build a map of those terrible events with all the information available online now. You can also explain what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle. Spoiler alert, nothing mysterious about it. Missing trains, time-traveling planes, strange black holes in the desert, spooky sounds, visual anomalies. You may not find the answers to all these riddles right away, but if you apply some critical thinking and a whole lot of dedication, you can eventually gain a better, more practical understanding of what exactly is going on. So, I'm now going to tell you about the disappearance of Martha Wright. But this story is not like all the others I just mentioned. This mysterious and creepy puzzle is almost impossible to solve. There are no leads, no clues, no theories that make any sense of it. This is one of those cases that can really make you feel clueless, pun intended. But regardless, I'll still try my best to explain it to you. So, let's look at this story from the very beginning and try not to miss even the tiniest details. The year is 1975. Jackson Wright and his wife Martha Wright are going by car from New Jersey to New York. It's a little hot inside the cabin, so Jackson turns on his AC. The road they're on leads them into the Lincoln Tunnel. They're driving in there, slowing down a bit. After a few minutes, Jackson starts to wipe the windshield, holding his hand on the wheel. Some condensation has accumulated on the glass because of the unstable conditioner. The rear window is also slightly fogged up, so Jackson slows down and then stops the car. There are no other vehicles in the tunnel. Jackson takes 2 rags out of the glove compartment. He gives one of them to Martha and asks her to wipe the rear window. His wife is moving into the backseat to remove the condensation. She doesn't leave the car. Jackson wipes the front window for a few seconds, turns to Martha, and can't find her. She's vanished. All the doors are closed. There is only one car in the tunnel, Jackson's. At first, he thinks it's some kind of a joke. He looks carefully at the back seats and out the windows. "Martha, where are you?" he asks in fear in his voice. He opens the door with his hands trembling. "Martha!" Jackson screams. His voice echoes through the entire dark tunnel. Martha Wright has just literally vanished into thin air. It's a bit creepy, isn't it? Poor Martha. And poor Jackson. At first glance, some might say that the real reason for Martha's disappearance is her husband, and that he made the whole story up as an excuse. We don't know what kind of relationship they were in. Maybe they had a fight or planned a divorce. Yes, it would be easy to blame the husband, but you don't have enough evidence to support that conclusion. Immediately after the disappearance, Jackson contacted the police. An investigation began. Detectives interviewed people passing by the tunnel that day. They carefully studied all the streets, alleys, and even the nearest basements. Of course, they didn't ignore the possibility that Jackson was guilty, but they couldn't find any evidence to that effect either. It almost seemed like Martha didn't exist at all. Jackson loved his wife. He couldn't get over the fact that no one could explain her disappearance. The police certainly couldn't find her. Jackson drove through that tunnel many times, hoping that one day, in the light of his headlights, the silhouette of his missing wife would appear. Are you getting nervous? Well, you need to beat that fear if you want to figure things out. You need to assess the situation with a clear mind. Okay, so it was 1975. There were no phones or cameras. There was one car in a dark tunnel. I'm sure there are some rooms and long corridors that connect the Lincoln Tunnel to the sewer system or the subway. So I'm thinking, what if someone took Martha Wright out of her car? What if it was mole people? You've probably heard of them. people that live in the underground labyrinths of the New York subway. There are a lot of rumors about them. The story goes that for some reason, they refused to live like ordinary citizens of the city and descended into its dungeons. They have no contact with sunlight at all. They can see in the dark. Their diet consists of rats and trash. They can quickly crawl on all fours and even climb walls. Their sense of smell is developed, and they can sense an uninvited guest from afar. Sometimes they get out of their tunnels at night to gather provisions or food. What if, on that terrible day in 1975, the mole people crept up to the car unnoticed, quietly opened the door, grabbed Martha, and dragged her into the kingdom of darkness? Jackson might not have noticed it. Sounds compelling, right? Well, fortunately, all these stories about mole people are fictional. There are people who live in the underground tunnel systems of major cities, but they don't look like moles and they eat normal food. In other words, they're just people trying to survive. There are many articles on the internet describing their real life. They come down to live in the tunnels for various reasons. The most common story is that for one reason or another, they couldn't make it in the city. For example, one guy lost his job and had a fight with his wife and got injured, so everyone abandoned him, and his only option was to migrate down below. There was one story of one woman who tried to hide from some bad people on those underground labyrinths. Hundreds and even thousands of people live in environments like these, each for their own reasons. And believe me, their way of life is not as terrible as it may seem. Many people in these tunnels have electrical appliances, internet access, water, and heating. Inside many of these communities, it is forbidden to steal, harm anybody, or behave rudely or obscenely. People here try to help each other. During the day, they can earn money by washing cars, or handing out bottles, or at the laundry. At night, they return back to the tunnels. Lots of these people just couldn't integrate into society. Some people are happier there because they don't have to pay taxes and rent. They don't have to follow the rules and pretend to be someone they aren't. Many of them are polite, smart, and well-educated. Often they are friends with many street artists and filmmakers. It's a unique lifestyle, all on its own, with its own communities. Occasionally, some of them would manage to get out of those tunnels, but then return, feeling that they really belonged to the tunnel system and couldn't quite integrate with the world up above. It was in 1904, when the first line of the New York subway opened, that stories about these mole people began to spread. Since then, these stories have been overrun with legends and myths. The city's residents thought that the tunnel's inhabitants had created secret societies with their own system of rules and laws, infrastructure, and the division between poor and rich. Few people ventured down there to check. But in the late 90s, more and more journalists began to conduct investigations about these mole people. Eventually, the myth was debunked. But who knows? Maybe in the 1970s, there were many dangerous people among the tunnel inhabitants. Honestly, I can't believe that they managed to pull Martha out of the car and into the tunnels without Jackson noticing. For one thing, she would have screamed or tried to kick loose. Plus, all the car doors were closed. So, as far as theories go, this ain't it. Okay, then let's keep looking. We have the car, the AC, the tunnel, the sunny weather. All right, let's look at the tunnel again. It seems to me that something is wrong with it. Something in the story doesn't quite add up. If we look at the maps and traffic data, we will see that many drivers use the Lincoln Tunnel daily. I'm sure it was just as popular in the 1970s. So how is it possible that Jackson and his wife were the only visitors to this tunnel in the middle of the day? They were driving in it for a few minutes, then stopped to wipe the windows. And not a single car passed by during that time. The tunnel wasn't closed or under repair. Jackson wouldn't have been able to get there if that weren't true. People walk through this tunnel in any weather. They hide here from the rain and heat and use the tunnels like a little shortcut. You can meet anyone there, at night, early in the morning, and in the afternoon. Why didn't Jackson see anyone? All right, we're getting nowhere with this. Let's look at the story from a different angle. Where were Jackson and Martha coming from? Where exactly were they going? To visit friends? Maybe their relatives? And who exactly were they? That's something we ought to know, right? And luckily for us, that's exactly where the most interesting part of the story actually is. As it turns out, there is no information about this married couple on the internet. You can check phone directories, databases, marriage registrations, and other sources, but you won't find Martha or Jackson Wright. You won't find their friends or relatives. That's strange, but what about the police? The case of the disappearance of Martha Wright is quite famous after all. Some big newspapers wrote about it. Perhaps someone's even covered it on TV. But if you search for it, you will soon find that the information about Martha Wright is basically the same on all websites. It's a small column without any additional information. If you search on Google Books, you'll find one result: a book describing mystical tales with no evidence. Reading it, it really just feels like someone just took all of the world's most famous urban legends and put them together on one page. Well, there you go. Looks like we found our answer. Martha Wright didn't disappear because she never really existed. But don't give the credit to me. I'm not the genius who solved this. To find the answer, I visited the greatest detective community in the world, Reddit users. They solved the mystery of Martha's disappearance long ago and shared it with everyone. Okay, here's a rhetorical question. Why did reputable newspapers publish an article about Martha Wright? And this wouldn't be the only time either. This story is similar to another famous case about a young guy who was walking through a field near his farm and just vanished into thin air. His family and friends saw it with their own eyes. This story appeared in several films and TV shows about mystical phenomena without any evidence or details. What's the point of making it up? Well, to sell copies. People like these kinds of riddles. People can be strangely captivated by the prospect of the unknown. One of the most popular fake mysteries was about the Pan Am Flight 914. This plane took off in 1955 from New York and then disappeared from all radars. It was supposed to arrive in Florida a few hours later, but it landed at the airport in Venezuela 37 years later. Another case, 1954. Santiago Airlines Flight 513 took off from an airport in West Germany. The plane was due to land in Brazil in 18 hours. There were 88 passengers and 4 crew members on board. The plane disappeared from the sky and from the radar. Air traffic controllers tried contacting the pilots but didn't receive any response. 18 hours later, they called the airport in Brazil. Those dispatchers couldn't confirm the plane's landing. They couldn't contact it either. The plane did eventually land on October 12, 1989. It was in perfect condition, but none of the passengers had survived. These stories seem unrelated to each other, but they do have 2 things in common. First, you won't find a list of passengers or employees. You'll also find that those dispatchers from the 50s and 80s didn't exist either. Second, you'll find that both of these stories were actually published in the same newspaper, one known for its tall tales and fake news. Once again, there is nothing mystical about these cases. But we have gotten to the truth, and now we know a lot more about how to evaluate information critically. The next time you hear about some girl seeing a flying monster near a rock festival or some guy disappearing from his pool, don't just believe it right away. Try to study the details. Check the sources. As a rule, these kinds of fantastical stories fall apart if you look at them just a little more closely. The real world is complicated and mysterious, but it is by no means impossible to understand. You just need to think critically. and pay attention to the details.
Illusion magic is a performing art, and when done right, it can make us gasp and forget that it's just a trick. But does anyone mind? After all, it's good to live in a world where magic is real, even if it's just an act. People have been performing magic tricks for ages, and the first illusionists started to perform in ancient Egypt, Rome, and Greece. The most famous trick from there is the one with cups and balls, making them disappear and reappear, change colors, and so on. But don't think that's all magicians could do in the ancient times. The first levitation tricks date back to those times too. Everything was so shocking to the public that they believed that the magicians doing their cups and balls tricks had supernatural powers. Ancient Greeks especially admired magic tricks. They were even making statues in honor of their famous magicians. Still, around the 4th century, the attitude started to change. People started seeing magic tricks as dangerous sorcery, and early illusionists started to get penalized. Being a magician wasn't safe anymore, and the magic vanished for over a millennium. No one was performing or even talking about it publicly, and the art stagnated for centuries. Around the 16th century, magic revived. People started to perform the first simple acts like card tricks or making the objects disappear. It was the Second Beginning, the oldest book on magic that's known today. The Discovery of Witchcraft was published in 1584. That book was one of the steps to debunk the myth of illusion magic being something evil and supernatural, logically explaining some well-known magic tricks. With time, people stopped being swindled about magic, and the art was taking off again. If I say, picture a magician, what will you imagine? Most likely, it'll be a person wearing a cape and a tall hat, pulling out a rabbit out of that said hat. Well, this magician's appearance, a cape and a tall hat, was popularized in the 19th century by a French magician, Herman the Great. But the rabbit trick in its traditional form was first performed a bit later by a Scottish magician, John Henry Anderson. Did you know that in Queensland, Australia, people aren't allowed to have a pet rabbit? Yes, the only people who can legally keep a rabbit are magicians. And they have to go through a long process and many documents to prove their profession and that they own a rabbit to show to the public. Then, they're granted a license and can officially keep the animal. What did rabbits do wrong? Well, they aren't very welcome there to protect the crops and native animals. For a long time, magic was a street art. But this guy, Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, changed it forever. He is the father of modern-style illusions, and he managed to bring the art to big stages of theater, performing for big audiences. He was also a great illusionist himself, and, in fact, the most famous magician of all time. Harry Houdini was so fascinated with this person that he chose his stage name in honor of Jean-Eugène Houdin, just adding an I at the end. Harry Houdini started as a card performer, but he soon realized it wasn't his cup of tea. Like most professionals, magicians also need to find their niche, the one they enjoy, the one where they're at their best, but also something new that excites people. And Houdini found it, being an escape artist. He would tie himself up in ropes and chains, immerse himself in water, bury himself in the ground, and somehow magically escape. He even escaped from the belly of some sea monster washed ashore. Historians still aren't sure who that beast was. Someone described it as a turtle, tortoise, fish, or whatever it is, so I can't give you more details than that. Anyways, it was washed ashore and the carcass of the monster was used for the trick. Houdini was shackled and climbed inside the creature. The creature was laced and chained. In about 15 minutes, Houdini reappeared on stage, and the sea monster was still chained. Houdini just asked for some air, saying that he was almost suffocated by the fumes inside. Illusion magic has nothing to do with supernatural powers, and illusionists, who know well that even the most fascinating trick is just a trick and has a logical explanation, are typically very skeptical when they hear that someone claims to have psychic powers. Harry Houdini was a professional skeptic and debunker of spiritualists. He even offered a reward for anyone who can demonstrate supernatural abilities, and he won't find a logical explanation for it. No one has gotten that reward. Today, the challenge is still open, and the prize went up to $1 million. I bet you didn't know it, but magicians were very actively involved in the birth of the movie industry, involved as performers and producers. Harry Houdini acted in several silent films. So, remember that guy, Herman the Great? The one in cape and long hat? He was performing some of his tricks along with his assistant and wife, Adelaide Herman. After he passed, Adelaide continued to perform solo and was one of the brightest stars in the end of the 19th century, owning the title the Queen of Magic. She was one of the few magicians who performed the bullet catch trick, which is considered the hardest trick to perform to this day. Her favorite trick to perform was the Phantom Bride. Here's how it goes. The illusionist makes a body of a bride dressed in white to rise on a brightly lit stage. A hoop passes through the body, showing that there are no wires that make the body levitate. Then, the illusionist pulls away the white silk and the bride disappears. How do they do it? Only the illusionists know. Magicians never reveal their secrets to non-magicians, so all that's left to us is being amazed, which I personally don't mind. Another famous trick, cutting a person in half and putting them back together. The trick was first performed in 1921 by an English magician, P.T. Selbit, and it had a raging success, shocking everyone who'd seen the act. Many illusionists repeated and improved the trick afterwards, but I'm here to tell you one story. In 1956, a guy was performing it on live TV. As soon as he divided his wife in half, the broadcast stopped. The TV viewers were mortified, thinking that something went wrong and the host cut off the show. Turned out everything was fine. The show got cut off because they ran out of time, and the timing wasn't exactly perfect. In the past century, illusions have escalated. Today, professional illusionists throw even more spectacular shows by making cars levitate or planes disappear. One of the most famous modern magicians is David Copperfield. Yes, his stage name is inspired by a Charles Dickens novel. Charles Dickens was actually an illusionist himself back in the day. Just saying. David Copperfield has started with card tricks as well, but his professional specialty are grand illusions. One of his most famous performances is the Escape from Alcatraz, a carefully guarded prison only one prisoner in history managed to escape from. Copperfield did the same, and no other illusionist yet repeated the success. Then, he made a whole plane disappear, which he performed with a live audience and repeated several times. In the 1980s, he made the Statue of Liberty disappear in front of a live audience on Liberty Island. He raised a screen in front of the statues, and when he dropped it, the statue was just gone. Spotlights were passing through, showing that there were no mirrors and that the statue was really gone. Then, he raised the sheet again, and when it dropped, it was back. I know. You want to know how he did it? Okay, I'll reveal this one as an exception. Like everything with illusion magic, it didn't vanish. In fact, the statue was hidden in plain sight, behind one of the towers holding up the screen. The bright lights shining through are actually important for the trick. They blind the audience and no one can notice the hidden statue behind the tower. But how did he move the statue? He didn't. He moved the audience. People were standing on a stage that can be rotated. Because of the lights and the loud music, people didn't even notice they were moved, and then moved back. Did I ruin the magic for you? Sorry about that. But that'll teach you to never watch trick reveals. Unless you want to become a magician, of course. Magicians even take a magician's oath before another magician can teach them tricks. The oath is to never reveal the secret of the trick to non-magicians, so that it doesn't ruin it. Also, it turns out that magic tricks aren't covered by intellectual property laws. If a magician comes up with an original trick, it can be stolen from them by a different magician and there will be no consequences for them. So, be careful if you want to become the next Houdini or David Copperfield.
Hey, want to learn some magic? You won't become a Houdini or David Copperfield yet, but that's where the adventure starts. By the end of the video, you will know how to do 10 magic tricks. Best part about it is that you need nothing but your hands. You ready? We'll go from the simpler ones to cooler ones. Let's start with the basics. The most common trick is to make your thumb disappear and then put it back again. Look, I'll show you. Cool, huh? So let me teach you this now. The thing is that it's not one thumb, it's two. So hold your hand like this so that you can see your palm. Stretch the fingers, but put the thumb down, below the line of your hand. Now use the other hand. Bend the thumb and attach it to the other hand this way. Place the index finger over so that you hide the gap. Now it looks like it's just one thumb, and that's the whole point. Now, when you move your hand from the front view, it will look like you pull half of the thumb away. Practice moving your hand to the side, back and forth, removing the thumb and putting it back. Once you put the thumb back, grab the original thumb and rotate it up. You'll have to train a bit to make it convincing, but you know the drill now. Practice makes perfect. Again, here's what it looks like. Another easy thing to learn is the illusion that you only have 4 fingers. Look, here they are. The thumb, the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky. There's no index finger. This is simple. Just bend your index finger and then cover it up with the other 3 in the thumb. And then just place your hand so that no one can see the other part of the finger that you couldn't cover. Easy peasy. Let's move on. Watch. The dot on the middle finger changes into a line. The key is that you should draw both of them, one on one edge of the finger and the other on the other edge. First, press your ring finger against the middle one and let it be just a bit above to hide the line. Put the index finger a bit below the middle finger's level to make the dot visible. So they see the dot. Then shake your hand. In that moment, change the position of the fingers. Now the one that was above hiding the line goes down to reveal it, while the other one that was revealing the dot should go higher to cover it up. Now they see the line instead. Now watch closely and try to figure out what's wrong. So I can twist the index finger around. What do you think is the catch here? I bet you think that I'm using the index finger of the other hand, but nope, not true. Things are way simpler here. Use a Sharpie's cap to put a circle print on the tip of your index finger. It kind of looks like a nail. So yeah, no other fingers required. People will just assume that's an actual nail. Now to how to turn your hands. Place the hand with the fake nail up front so that the palm faces you and the nails face the spectator. Place the other hand over it this way, with the palm facing the spectator and the thumb going between the index finger and the middle finger. Close the hand and rotate it so that the palm now faces the spectator. Open the fist so that the other fingers of the palm are covered. The fake nail will create an illusion that you twisted the index finger. Close the hand again and rotate one more time to twist the finger back to normal. Hey, look what I can do! Yeah, I can bend my pinky finger this much. Yeah, I do have bones there. It's just an illusion. Let me show you how to do this. With the palm of one of your hands facing the spectator, use the index finger of your other hand to push your pinky finger right in the middle. You should really focus on pushing its skin in particular because it helps the illusion. Then, using the thumb, push the top of the pinky down and a bit to the side. Together with pulled skin, it creates the illusion that you bend your pinky unnaturally. I can make my pinky shrink. And yeah, of course, I can make it grow back afterwards. It's easy to learn, so here's what I do. In reality, I just make it bend like this. To hide it, just put the thumb of the other hand over it and use your index finger to support the top part of the pinky from behind. Then just bend your pinky. The prolonged part of your thumb will cover the action. Then pull it back. Look, this one is cooler. This is way more visual, and it actually looks like magic. It requires some practice, but it's not too hard to learn, so let me teach you. First, you need to practice doing one thing, putting the tip of your pinky on the bottom knuckle of the ring finger. You should practice it until it starts to feel natural, because that's how you'll hide the pinky. Once you've learned that, you can move on to the next step and that is placing your hand correctly for the spectator. The index finger is the front finger the spectator sees, and right after it comes the middle finger. These two should be placed below the ring finger so that the pinky can hide behind them when you put it on the ring finger's knuckle. Be sure to arrange the fingers properly and to be comfortable keeping them in this position. Next, removing the finger. Use the 4 fingers of your other hand and put them between the pinky and the ring finger. Rotate the hand around, creating the illusion that you're taking the pinky away. Once your 4 fingers cover up the pinky, put it on the ring finger's knuckle. Then move the hand away. The pinky disappears. To bring it back, put the other hand back and, while covering that part of your hand, bring the pinky back. You can find your own movements to make it look more impressive and make the illusion stronger. Practice and you'll get there. Look, here is another disappearing pinky trick. It won't be hard to learn because you already know part of this. Again, the angle is important. You have to place your index and middle fingers so that you can hide your pinky finger behind them like you just learned. Make sure you can still place the tip of your pinky on the bottom knuckle of the ring finger. The other thing you should learn is placing your ring and middle fingers on your thumb just like this. Make sure it goes naturally. Here's how the trick goes. Hide your pinky finger. Holding the thumb, middle, and ring fingers this way, just place them where the pinky should be. The ring finger will appear as if it's the other hand's pinky. Shake it a bit to create an illusion that you're taking the pinky off, and then lift those 3 fingers. Don't wait too long. Give it a moment and then place the 3 fingers back and quickly return the real pinky. Look at this. A hand literally passes right through the other one. Let me show it to you again. See? You can learn to make this illusion too, and here's how. The secret is that the hand that passes through is still that same front hand. Look, I'll do this again. Look at the thumb, it's on this side. The thumb on my other hand is on the opposite side. Let me do it again. Watch the thumb. See? It seemed like the hand passed through the front one, but the thumb is still on the same side it was. It's the same hand. Place one of your hands, I'll go with the left one, in front of you with your palm facing the spectator. Make sure that all the fingers are open and have a lot of space between one another. The other hand has the palm turned away from you. It goes behind the hand in front just like this. The fingers should come through the fingers of the front hand freely, with the little finger being in between the front thumb and index finger. So, what you do is keep the front hand in front of you, and as the other hand approaches it, the fingers go through each other and then you squeeze them a bit. Then, you put the back hand back and do it again, the second time, and pull it away again. Now, the third time. And here's where the trick works. Once again, you put the hand the same way. Close the fingers of the hand on the back. Then you should reopen the fingers of the back hand and close the ones of the front hand instead. Then you also pull the back hand away and move the front hand forward. For the illusion to work smoothly, it should happen fast and naturally. You might need a bit of practice, but once you master it, it really looks like you can make your hands pass through one another. The last one is the trick of a coin that travels from one hand to the other. Look, this one is the hardest one for today, and you'll need some time to master it so it looks smooth. Of course, the secret is you will need 2 coins, one in either hand. But making it work will require a lot of training. You hide one coin in your palm. The other coin in the other palm you show to the spectator. Now, you have to practice making the coin slide naturally back into your palm. Keep the fingers of the hand up to hide the coin from the spectator. At the same time, slide the coin in the other hand up to show it to the spectator. If you make these 2 motions at the same time, the illusion will work. Take your time to learn how to do it smoothly, and you're a certified magician. Have you ever looked at magicians and thought excitedly, how is it even possible? But what if I told you that you could do no worse? All incredible magic tricks have explanations, and some of them are so simple that you can easily repeat them at home to baffle your friends and family members. A sugar cube number. For this magic trick, you'll need a pencil, a sugar cube, a glass of water, and some audience. Ask a volunteer to pick a number from 1 to 10. Then use the pencil to write the chosen number on the sugar cube. Pick the cube up, and while doing it, discreetly squeeze it against your thumb. The pencil core is made up of graphite, which sticks to human skin very well. That's why the number will get transferred to your finger. Drop the sugar cube into the water and let it melt. Then ask the volunteer to wave their hand over the glass. After that, press your thumb against their hand. The number will magically transfer to their skin. A spoon bending trick. You can easily pretend to be one of the Matrix characters by bending a spoon and then returning it to its original state. Grab a spoon with both of your hands and position its bowl open side up against the table. Then pretend to be pressing on the spoon's handle. The hidden part of the spoon will be sliding through your hands until it ends up near the surface of the table. But to anyone watching, it will look as if you're bending the spoon. After that, take the spoon off the table with both of your hands and show your audience that it's unbent. Ice painted from the inside. Prepare some ice cubes and make several salt solutions mixed with different paints. Then tell your audience that you're going to color the ice cubes from the inside. With the help of a pipette, put a few drops of the solution on each ice cube. All the spectators will see is the ice gradually changing its color from the inside. But you'll know that at that moment, the salt is dissolving the ice, drilling tiny holes in it, and creating beautiful, colorful patterns. Pepper and water. Pour water into a glass and sprinkle it with some ground pepper so that it's spread all over the water surface. Then ask someone from the audience to dip their finger into the water to make the pepper separate. Nothing will happen. After that, you say an incantation, put your own finger into the water, and the pepper rushes to the outer edges of the glass. Magic! Well, not really. No one knows that before dipping your finger in the water, you covered it with soap or dishwashing liquid. That's the secret of this trick. Dancing worms. For this super impressive magic trick, you'll need some cornstarch, food coloring, water, a thin metal baking tray, and a stereo subwoofer. Mix 2 cups of cornstarch with 1 cup of water and pour the mixture onto the tray. Then add several drops of food coloring and put the tray on the subwoofer. Make sure to press the tray against the subwoofer and switch on some loud music. You'll see colorful little worms dancing. A needle trick. Tell your audience that you can make a needle float on water. Everybody knows that since steel is denser than water, the needle's supposed to drown when placed in the water. But if you cover the needle with some grease, for example cooking oil, it won't let the needle go down. Voila! Your friends are thoroughly impressed. Age guessing. All you'll need to surprise people by guessing their age is a calculator. Pick a volunteer and ask them to punch in their age while hiding the screen from everyone. Then ask them to multiply this number by 2 and add 1 to the result. Tell them to multiply this number by 5 and then by 10. After that, ask the person to write the final number on a piece of paper and give it to you. Ignore the last 2 digits of the number you see. What's left is the volunteer's age. A levitating magic stick. Intrigue your audience by saying you can make a matchstick levitate. Then take an empty matchbox and poke the bottom part of the matchstick through the middle of the box so that it sticks upward right from the center. Lean another magic stick against the first one so that their tips are touching. Then use the third magic stick to light the point where the first 2 magic sticks are touching. In a few moments, the leaning magic stick will start to rise upward as if it's levitating. Even better, after you blow the flame out, it'll still be hanging in midair. The heat fuses the heads of the first 2 matches and makes the leaning one curl up. But your spectators don't need to know that. A flame without a shadow. Get yourself a flashlight, several matches, and some audience. Light a match while keeping it several inches away from the wall. Switch on the flashlight and shine it over your hand that's holding the match. On the wall, you'll see only the shadows created by your hand and the matchstick. The flame won't have a shadow. Fire doesn't cast shadows because, unlike physical materials, it doesn't prevent light from passing through. A levitating cup trick. All you need for this trick is a styrofoam cup and some practice. Make a hole in the side of the cup so that your thumb fits inside. Show the cup to your audience, but avoid flashing the side with the hole. Announce that you're going to make the cup levitate and discreetly push your thumb into the hole. Now, you just need to make magical movements with your other fingers. It'll look as if the cup is levitating in the air between your hands. Magic fire extinguisher. Mix white vinegar and baking soda in a cup and cover it until the mixture stops fizzling. After that, pretend you're pouring the air from the cup over a burning candle. This reaction produces a gas called carbon dioxide, which can put out a fire. Your audience will be amazed to see the flame going out seemingly on its own. Moving objects. Fill a plastic bottle with water and put inside some light object, for example, a piece of foil or a cover from McDonald's dipping sauce. Wait until the object sinks a bit and start making magical movements with one of your hands. Meanwhile, your other hand, positioned at the bottom of the bottle, should hold it in place. Your audience will see that the object moves up and down in the water following your orders. What they don't know is that you slightly press the bottle to make the object go up and release the pressure to make it go down. A skewer through a balloon. Take a medium-sized balloon filled with air, a wooden skewer, and a drop of vegetable oil or baby shampoo. Cover the skewer with the oil or shampoo and start to push it through the balloon. Be gentle but firm and keep pressing until the skewer breaks through the rubber. Your audience won't believe their eyes. The balloon hasn't burst. A coin inside a bottle. Cut a vertical slit in the side of a regular plastic bottle. The slit should be just large enough to let a quarter slip through. Opt for a bottle that has ridges. It'll help you to conceal all the necessary modifications. Show your audience the bottle and a coin, and count to 3 before slapping your coin-holding hand against the bottle. At this moment, you have to squeeze the coin inside the bottle as fast and discreetly as you can. With enough practice, the spectators will only notice the coin magically appear inside the bottle. A magnetic hand. Take a steel spoon and claim that you can magnetize your hand and make the spoon stick to it. Put the spoon on the table and move your left hand over it a couple of times. Then tightly grasp your left wrist with your right hand and pretend to be applying great pressure. At the same time, grab the spoon with your left hand and clutch it. Then slowly open your hand. The spoon seems to have stuck to your palm. Your spectators don't know that you've stretched your right hand index finger along your palm to support the spoon. Have some practice, and no one will guess that the magnetized spoon is just an illusion. A climbing ring. Take a key ring or a finger ring and a rubber band. After cutting or breaking the band and looping it through the ring, stretch it out between your hands. One of your hands should be higher than the other. Say an incantation, and your shocked audience will see the ring slowly climb upward. The secret is to stretch out only a relative small portion of the rubber band. The rest of it should be loose and tucked into the palm of your lower hand. As you're slowly letting this hidden part out, it'll look as if the ring's climbing up the rubber band on its own. A crayon trick. All you need for this trick is a box of multicolored crayons. Stand with your back facing the audience. Ask one person to pick a crayon and put it in your hands. Pretend to be examining it with your fingers, then turn to the audience with your hands still behind you. While distracting the audience with some bizarre incantation, scrape the crayon with your left thumbnail to transfer some wax under it. After that, while still keeping your right hand with the crayon behind your back, use your left hand to make some magical gestures. At the same time, you need to sneak a peek at your left thumbnail to figure out the crayon's color. Announce it to the audience, and don't forget to be mysterious. An egg in a bottle. To perform this trick, you'll need a boiled egg, a bottle with a neck that's smaller than the diameter of the egg, a drop of sunflower or olive oil, a thin strip of paper, and a lighter. Before performing the trick, cover the neck of the bottle with some oil. Then tell your audience that your magic is so powerful that you can make the egg squeeze through the neck of the bottle. Set the paper on fire and drop it to the bottom of the bottle. After that, very fast, put the egg on the neck of the bottle and listen to some dazzled wows as the spectators see the egg being pulled inside. The secret is simple. The flame burns the oxygen and reduces the pressure inside the bottle. Combined with the normal pressure outside, it makes the egg squeeze into the bottle. Turning a drink into cash. Cut a plastic or styrofoam cup in half and throw away the top part. Fill the bottom part with coins to the brim. Then take a bigger cup and make a hole in its bottom. It should be only big enough to let your finger squeeze through. Cover the bigger cup's bottom with a sponge and place the coin-filled mini cup inside. Then fill the cups with coffee or strong tea so that the liquid hides the coin. Now all you need to do is use your finger to push the smaller cup upward. The sponge will absorb the drink in the cup, and your audience will be surprised when they see coins appear out of nowhere. A mind reader. Choose a person from the audience and ask them to mentally pick some item in the room. After that, you leave the room, and the volunteer has to tell everyone else which item they've chosen. You return to the room and pick another, seemingly random person to help you. In truth, this person is far from random. It's your assistant, even though the audience knows nothing about this fact. Your mole goes from one object to another, touching each of them one by one. At one point, they touch something black, and you know that the next item will be the one you need. For your spectators, it looks like magic, but for you, it's just efficient teamwork. Turning water into ice. Take a bottle of water and put it in a freezer for about 2 to 3 hours. After you make sure the water is cold enough, take it out of the freezer, open the lid, and start pouring the water on something cold. For example, ice cubes in a bowl or an ice pack. Your friends will be shocked to see that you instantly turn water into ice. To make the process even more impressive, you can add some food coloring to the water or use fruit juice or Coke. Soda that changes its color. Take a paper cup filled with ice cubes and a bottle of clear soda and tell your audience that you can make the drink change its color. Indeed, you pour the soda into the cup and in a couple of seconds, it changes its color. Just make sure that before performing this trick, you hide some food coloring under the ice cubes. When the soda mixes with the paint, it magically turns blue, or green, or any other color you've picked. A pre-sliced banana. In front of your intrigued audience, you take a banana and peel it, only to reveal it's already sliced. How come? Before performing this magic trick, carefully stick a pin into an unpeeled banana and wiggle it back and forth, cutting several pieces. A levitation trick. With enough practice, you can make your friends believe that you can float in the air. The most important thing about this trick is the correct positioning of your body. Your audience should be standing behind you so that they only see the side of one of your feet and both heels. If your position is correct, after you stand on the tiptoes of your hidden foot, everyone watching you will believe that you're floating above the ground. A snow queen illusion. Take a plastic or styrofoam cup and cover its bottom with a sponge. Then place several ice cubes on top of the sponge. Now you can invite your audience. In front of your friends, pour a bit of water into the cup. Blow on it, make several magical movements with your hands, and remember to say abracadabra. Then turn the cup and let the ice cubes fall out. By that time, the sponge will have already absorbed all the water. A levitating card trick. To begin with, place several fanned-out playing cards under your palm one by one. Then lift your hand, and your audience will let out a collective "ah" when they see the cards float up along with your hand. To perform this trick, you'll need to put on a ring on your middle finger. After that, carefully place a matchstick under the ring so that it's positioned along your finger. Every time you slide a card under your palm, make sure that its bottom side gets between the matchstick and your finger. Remember to press your fingers down against the cards as well. This way, they'll stay in position more firmly. piercing your jaw with finger. At first sight, this trick looks terrifying, but it's only until you find out how to perform it. Put some flour and a bit of gelatin in 2 different bowls. Add some water to the gelatin and wait until it dissolves. You can help the process by stirring the mixture with a spoon. Start to add flour to the mixture, 1 spoonful after another. In the end, you'll get a pretty thick homogeneous mixture. Take some modeling clay and wrap it around your finger to make a mold. Make sure to seal all the holes and gaps. When the mold is ready, fill it with the mixture you've prepared in advance. Place the filled mold in the freezer and leave it there for several hours. Then carefully remove all the modeling clay. Give the artificial finger a natural look with the help of some makeup and use a fake nail to make it seem real. Now, to shock your friends, secretly put the artificial finger vertically in your open mouth, and the trick is ready. They're bound to believe that you've just pierced your jaw with your finger. Ooh. A card trick. This trick looks nothing but impressive. You have a plastic bag in your hand with a playing card inside. You shake the bag and voila! The card changes its suit. To prepare for this trick, take 2 playing cards of different suits and colors but of the same value and glue them back to back. Then put them in the plastic zip bag and start shaking. The main thing here is not to let your audience see the other side of the plastic bag. Hey, if you learned something new today, then give the video a like and share it with a friend. And here are some other videos I think you'll enjoy. Just click to the left or right. And remember, stay on the bright side of life.
You just wanted to heat up a slice of leftover pizza, but something went terribly wrong. As soon as you touched the device, you felt a jolt, as if something had pushed you. You saw sparks, heard something blow up. Then, darkness. Oh, it feels as though your head is going to implode. What happened? Oh, the microwave. You got an electric shock. Good thing you're alive and more or less okay. Even better, there's no fire raging in your apartment. Moaning, you get up. Your hands shaking, you pick up a glass to pour yourself some water. But the next moment, you drop it to the floor. The thing is much heavier than you expected. But that's not all. Now, it's also yellowish and not transparent. After examining it, you have to admit that the substance looks pretty much like gold? You laugh at yourself and then take your new glass to a jewelry appraiser. You're absolutely dazed after leaving their office. Your glass is indeed made up of the purest gold ever. The fact that the appraiser told you that the gold was a bit strange slips your mind. You've got more urgent mysteries to solve, like how on earth did the glass become golden? It must have happened at the moment you touched it. But after that, you held on to handrails, doorknobs, and whatnot. You even shook the appraiser's hand. You come home and get down to work. You touch your sofa, bed, pillows, cups, plates, silverware, and suddenly a spoon in your hand becomes gold. Your ability does work, but not always. Even so, you're going to be rich because, gold. This metal is extremely valuable. It doesn't corrode, is easy to smelt, and is rare enough for people to appreciate it. You start thinking of all your dreams that will finally come true. You can go on vacation to some exotic islands and buy the house of your dreams. Little did you know at the time what a terrible disaster your newly acquired ability would cause. Time passes, and you notice you turn things into gold more and more often. Soon it happens every 3rd time you touch something. And the day comes when every single thing you pick up immediately becomes gold. After cheering for a good 5 minutes, you realize it's actually not that great. How are you going to cook, sleep, take your dog for a walk? With growing horror, you understand your ability might end up being a curse, similar to the one that King Midas had. There's a myth about a monarch who was living his comfortable and rich life in a huge castle. But it was never enough for the man. He was way more ambitious than that. He wanted everything he touched to turn into gold. It definitely rings a bell. But when his wish was granted, the king found out it was the most horrible thing that had ever happened to him. You shudder and decide to think about something that doesn't make you so stressed. Like, how is the stuff you do even possible from a scientific point of view? Do you simply change the atoms of whatever you choose to touch? Let's say it's a remote control. Then, as soon as you pick it up and make it golden, it'll immediately become many times denser and heavier. The gold atoms won't appreciate the way they're squeezed together. they start to push back against each other. Boom! And the remote control would explode with enormous force. But it doesn't happen. This means your ability works in a different way. For example, what if you don't change the atoms but simply rearrange them? This would explain why the appraiser was so surprised and called your gold glass strange. This gold is kind of foamy, with loads of tiny gaps inside. Suddenly, it dawns on you, and you feel even more horrified than before. You must be very, very careful now. What if you lean down to touch your dog? What if you accidentally hug your brother or touch your friend's hand? After panicking for an hour or so, you remember a good friend of yours is a scientist. All right, time to visit her. After overcoming her initial shock, your friend jumps into action. Soon, you've got a solution. A pair of gloves made of a special material. You have to wear these gloves at all times. Your friend goes into details, trying to explain how the gloves will protect the world from you. But it sounds extremely scientific. You lose track of her explanation and stop listening after half a minute. Your life is both easier and more difficult now. You don't have to control yourself around other people, but at the same time, you have to learn to take a shower, eat, play volleyball, and pet your dog, all while wearing your gloves. Luckily, it doesn't take much time for you to get used to your new style. But then, on a sunny day, everything spirals out of control. You're outside, in the park. Your dog seems to have got the zoomies and is sprinting around in circles. That's when your left hand starts itching inside the glove. Oh, nothing bad will happen if I... And you pull off the glove. Your dog chooses this moment to crash into your legs. You lose your footing and start falling forward. You see everything happening around you as if in slow-mo. 1 second, and your gloveless hand touches the ground. Another second, and golden-colored waves start spreading away from you. They're turning everything you can see into gold. And then, you're suddenly floating in the air. What's going on? Remember that very first glass you turned into gold? It didn't change its shape or size because it wasn't large enough. But for the entire planet, this is a big deal. The gold you create is spongy, but you can't have a spongy Earth. Its gravity won't let you. It starts to squeeze the planet and succeeds. The not-so-microscopic gaps between the atoms making up our beautiful once-blue globe disappear, and Earth starts to shrink at breakneck speed. In no time, its radius gets 1/3 smaller than before. But back to your current situation. You've never been stuck in a falling elevator, but you think this is what it must feel like. You've got an impression that someone suddenly pulled the lever responsible for Earth's gravity and switched it off. At first, you're terrified. What if when this whole falling situation comes to a stop, you'll hit the ground with enormous force? But it hasn't happened yet, and you relax a bit. The thing is that instead of moving away or coming closer, the ground seems to be falling together with you. From your vantage point, you see water floating in the air. It can't be the oceans or seas. They turned into gold at the same moment the ground did. Meanwhile, the water in the air starts to form droplets, and you realize that's all the liquid that was in the atmosphere before the accident. That's what you decided to call the catastrophe you had caused. The only other living beings you spot are birds. They must have been in the air when the change occurred. Sometime later, you feel a sting. A mosquito! That's how you find out that besides birds, there are also flying bugs. In about 10 minutes, the planet stops shrinking. It's probably reached the size it needs. If this strange world worked as it should, you would have crashed to the ground at a speed of almost 20,000 miles per hour. But for some mysterious reason, it doesn't happen. Phew, I'm still alive, so it can't be so bad, you think. But then, almost immediately, another thought makes you change your opinion. On the planet turned into gold, where are you going to find food and drinking water? What will happen to the atmosphere without trees and algae that produce oxygen? But it's just the beginning. The planet gets suddenly squeezed with enormous force. That's why the temperatures in its core will soon become as high as they are in the core of a star. Also, when the planet finishes collapsing in on itself, a powerful shockwave will catapult its atmosphere up into space. In the end, the red-hot ball of plasma that our planet will eventually turn into will cool down. Earth will turn into a shiny ball of gold hanging somewhere out there between Mars and Venus. You'll figure it out in no time. But right now, you are standing in the middle of a vast gold plain. In your head, there are only questions and not a single answer.
The transparent man. Imagine walking along a street one day and noticing a man with a transparent torso. You can look through him and see everything that's happening behind his back. How on earth is that possible? To perform this trick, the magician needs to use several gadgets. There's a camera on his back. This device is transmitting the picture to the TV screen securely fixed on the illusionist's chest. The only drawback of this trick, it can't surprise anyone but those who are right in front of the magician. Solid water. Magicians keep walking on water, be it the middle of the Thames or private swimming pools. Do they use special shoes? Invisible ropes? You won't understand this trick unless you know what to pay attention to. Illusionists use industrial-strength plexiglass platforms on long legs. These legs are also made from plexiglass. The platforms are put underwater and a magician's walking on them. The construction is completely invisible if you glance at it from a certain angle. It's impossible to detect it, and even a camera can't spot it. At the same time, the magician can see where to step. Sometimes this trick is performed in a swimming pool. Then the people inside are actors who pretend they don't see the glass. Water in midair. A performer takes a glass and fills it with water. After that, they cover the glass with a piece of ordinary cardboard and turn it upside down. Some water spills, but on the whole, the cardboard doesn't let the water escape, all thanks to the vacuum that appears inside. And then, the magician pulls the cardboard away, but the water stays inside the glass. The glass the illusionist uses isn't an ordinary one. It has a tiny hole drilled in its side right near the bottom. A casual onlooker can't notice this tiny opening. The second secret is a transparent plastic lid that is stuck to the cardboard. When the magician places the cardboard in place, they also cover the glass with the lid. It stays there as long as the performer closes the hole with their finger. As soon as the finger moves away from the opening, the water comes rushing out. A magic broomstick. Hey, I think my second-grade teacher rode to work on one of these. Hey, just kidding. Famous magicians can sometimes be seen outside flying their broomsticks. Magic or an illusion? Even if you come closer, you won't spot any harnesses, which means the magic cleaning tool isn't hanging in the air. But pay attention to how close to the ground the broom is. The secret of this trick is simple: a skateboard and a large mirror. The magician is riding the skateboard. All the while, he's holding the mirror on his left side, and a fake leg is dangling over it. From a distance, it looks as if the illusionist is actually flying through the air. A card through glass. A performer asks a person from the audience to pick a card from a deck. Then they should put it back without showing it to the magician. The illusionist tries to guess which card was chosen, but all the attempts are unsuccessful. Pretending to be furious, the magician throws the cards at the window. To the viewer's endless amazement, the very card that was picked before sticks to the glass. But the most shocking thing? It's on the other side of the window. To do this trick, the magician needs 2 identical card decks and 2 loyal assistants. Plus, the audience has to stand with their backs to the window. The performer asks to choose a card and, indeed, doesn't see which one gets picked. But the assistants notice everything. The one who's hiding behind the window sticks the needed card to the glass using some wax. So all the magician has to do is find the same card in the deck and hide it away. This way, nobody will notice there are, in fact, 2 identical cards. A floating man. You might have seen street performers who supposedly use magic to levitate in the air. Well, I have to tell you the truth, it's not sorcery that helps them sit on nothing for hours on end. This trick doesn't demand any effort from a performer. On the ground beneath them, there's a metal platform. It's covered with a small carpet. On one of its corners, there's a steel rod that sticks out. Connected with this metal bar, there's a chair-like construction. It looks as if it's hanging in the air. All this structure is hidden under the illusionist's baggy clothes. The only challenge they face is to sit still for such a long time. A steel straw. In this magic trick, a simple, flimsy plastic straw can get deep into or even through a potato or an apple. The only thing a magician has to do is to press on the straw. The audience is left wondering why the fragile thing doesn't bend or break at once. This trick is so simple you can easily repeat it. Grasp the straw so that you can cap its end with the thumb of your dominant hand. This way, you'll trap the air inside once the straw meets the hard surface of the fruit or veggie. It'll stiffen the thing and make it hard enough to pierce through. Once you let go of that straw, it'll become flexible again. Disappearing water. Tell your audience you know how to make water disappear. Take a cup one can't see through, pour some water inside, and wait for a few moments. After that, turn the cup over. Nothing's pouring out. The water has vanished. The trick lies in 1 tablespoon of sodium polyacrylate you put in the bottom of the cup in advance. The substance acts like a sponge. It will absorb the water and turn it into a solid gel. Just make sure not to let the audience see the insides of the cup before or after the trick. You can buy sodium polyacrylate at any hardware or gardening store. It can be sold as moisture-saving pellets. The same stuff is used in disposable diapers. Just tear one open and collect the liquid holding material. Oh, by the way, it's better to use a diaper that hasn't already been used. That can get really messy. Make sure you experiment before showing the trick to your friends. This way, you can test what amount of water you should pour into the cup so that it vanishes effectively. A coin in a bottle. Cut a vertical slit in the side of a regular plastic bottle. The slit should be just large enough to let a quarter slip through. It's better to use a bottle with ridges. They'll help you conceal all the modifications. Show your audience the bottle and the coin. Count to 3 and slap your coin-holding hand against the bottle, squeezing the coin inside. If you practice in advance, the spectators will only notice the coin magically appear inside the bottle. Pepper and water. Pour some water into a glass and sprinkle it with ground pepper so that all the surface is covered. Ask someone from the audience to dip their finger in the water so that the pepper separates. No one will be able to do it. Claim it's your turn and say an incantation. Then lower your own finger in the water. The pepper rushes to the outer edges of the glass. It looks like magic, but only because no one knows the secret of this trick. Before dipping your finger in the water, you need to cover it with a bit of soap or dishwashing liquid. A magnetic hand. Impress your audience by making a pencil or a pen stick to your palm. This trick is elementary, and everything you need to perform it is a wristwatch and 2 pencils. Put on the watch and place the end of the first pencil under its band on the inner side of your wrist. The other end of the pencil should reach the middle of the palm. Place the second pencil on the table. Grab the wrist with the watch on it with your other hand. Then put your hand palm down on top of the second pencil. With the help of the hand that's holding your wrist, slide the tip of the first pencil over the second one. Practice the move several times in advance to be subtle. Now you can lift your hand. The pencil will seem to have stuck to it. A sugar cube number. For this magic trick, you need a pencil, a sugar cube, and a glass of warm water. Ask a volunteer to pick a number from 1 to 10 and write it on the sugar cube in pencil. Then pick the cube up. While doing it, discreetly squeeze it against your thumb. The pencil core is made up of graphite, which sticks to human skin very well. The number will get transferred to your finger. Drop the sugar cube into the water and stir it until it melts. After that, tell your audience that after drinking the water, you will know the number picked by the volunteer. Sneak a peek at your thumb and take a sip. Now you're ready to shock the audience with the correct answer. Bottoms up! 20 miles south of Olympia, Washington, there are strange 8 feet tall and 30 feet wide grass mounds. They cover an area of nearly 1 square mile. These small hills are known as the Mima Mounds, and nobody knows what created them. They've been haunting the dreams of geologists for nearly 200 years. Scientists have been arguing about what exactly caused these mounds to pop up all over the place. There are such theories as earthquakes, glaciers, gas vents, clay swelling, and even termites. In 1942, geologists supposed that pocket gophers could create the mounds. In 1987, the theory was tested. Small bits of metal were pushed into the mounds and monitored with the help of a metal detector. As gophers dug their burrows, the pieces of metal were pushed uphill. A computer program analyzed those results. It turned out that many generations of gophers could indeed form the mounds. It would take them over hundreds of years. But why would they push the soil up when it takes way less energy to move it behind them? That's unclear. So far, gophers' involvement is still just a theory. Scientists used to consider the Amazon rainforest a large ecosystem that's been filled with trees for millions of years. Yet when the 16-foot-wide Amazon rings were discovered, it changed all the theories. These rings proved that the area looked very different before forests started growing here. It looked like a modern savanna. Scientists took soil samples near the lakes, and the results showed that this soil didn't come from a rainforest. It was from dry lands. It may mean that people who used to live here probably had a completely different environment from what scientists thought. Geologists are still studying the rings, and they're trying to figure out what purpose they serve. Known as the Eye of the Sahara, the Reichat structure is a 30-mile-wide ring-shaped object in the middle of the desert. Reichat was initially thought to be a meteorite impact site, but now scientists believe that it was created by the erosion of a hill or mountain. It eroded away over time, but left layers of rock rings that were once a mountain. The eye is so prominent that the astronauts on board the International Space Station can see it from up there. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, windiest place on Earth. But the strangest thing about it might be located deep under the ice. Until about 60 years ago, Antarctica was considered flat land. That all changed in 1958 when the Gamburtsev mountain range was discovered. It was hiding under 2 miles of ice. Its peaks were more than 10,000 feet tall, and the whole range stretched for 750 miles. That's 1/3 of the height of Mount Everest and about half the length of the Himalayas. No one has ever laid eyes on the Gamburtsev Mountains. The ice hides deep valleys and steep inclines. They could show what Earth looked like millions of years ago. Lake Vostok in East Antarctica was discovered in 2012 during drilling. Scientists found a freshwater lake, untouched and unfrozen, under more than 2 miles of ice. Researchers believe that undiscovered microorganisms and unique geochemical processes might exist in the lake. After all, it hasn't seen sunlight or been exposed to Earth's atmosphere for over 15 million years. But drilling into the lake is likely to ruin the ecosystem below and contaminate one of the last untouched places on the planet. There's a 350-foot anomaly in the Indian Ocean, known as the Indian Ocean Geoid Low, IOGL. It produces the largest distorting natural gravitational force in the world. Heavy mineral deposits, many deep-sea trenches, and magma reservoirs disturb the magnetic field in this area. Earth's gravity changes in different places around the planet. It allows researchers to look for patterns and figure out what's happening beneath the surface. Higher gravity fields usually means denser materials below, and vice versa. Some scientists believe that the anomaly might be a dent in the planet's mantle, that it's working its way up to the crust. The Cave of Crystals in the Mexican state of Chihuahua. These caverns are filled with amazing gypsum crystals that crisscross the entire subterranean area. The caves were discovered in 2000, when workers were draining water from a zinc mine. That's when they stumbled upon these sparkling structures. The crystals were so pure and large, around 33 feet in length, and had such sharp edges that geologists couldn't date them using conventional methods. Luckily, researchers discovered 50,000-year-old bacteria samples within one of the complex constructions. It was extremely hard to work in the caves. There, the temperatures reached 136 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity was extremely high. Scientists needed special cooling equipment to get down to the cave, even though they only made short trips. Unfortunately, the company that owned the mine re-flooded the cave system, preventing any further study. Around 450 miles away from Bangkok, in northeast Thailand, there's a 75-million-year-old rock formation. These rocks look like three whales swimming together. The beautiful design created by nature became known as Three Whales Rock. Millions of years ago, this area was just a desert, but the land was changing. Gradually, sandstone got pulled apart by the movements of tectonic plates and erosion. That's how these spectacular formations were created. If you decide to explore the system of trails around Three Whales Rock, you'll find waterfalls and abundance of fauna and flora there. Locals call the Potomsky crater in Siberia Fire Eagle's Nest. It's a gigantic 500-foot wide and 100-foot tall limestone mound. Nothing grows near or on top of it, and animals do their best to avoid this place. First discovered by geologists in 1949, the crater is believed to be around 500 years old. The most likely theory of its origin is a burst of steam. This could happen during a period of rapid gas expansion in the region. Scientists think that Fire Eagle's Nest might be a very rare gas volcano. Gigantic gas stockpiles might have been trapped deep underground. It could happen because of limestone forming around these storages and creating immense pressure. A sudden release of the stored gas could have formed this mammoth-sized hole in the surrounding forest. Lake Hillier in Western Australia is only 2,000 feet in length, but its color has been baffling geologists for a long time. Unlike most pink lakes in the world, Lake Hillier has a pink color all year round. Its hue isn't affected by sunlight or temperature. If you look at it from above, the lake's bright color will be in stark contrast with the surrounding blue of the Great Australian Blight. The real reason for the Hillier's unique color is still not fully understood. Many presume it has something to do with microalgae in the lake, or it might be a reaction between salt and sodium bicarbonate found in the water. The Chocolate Hills in the Bohol province of the Philippines are covered in lush green vegetation for the largest part of the year. But these 1,200-plus mounds turn a chocolate brown during the dry season. That's what gave them their name. Strangely, no trees or shrubs grow on them. Another mystery is how the mounds managed to develop so symmetrically. There are myths that involve giants throwing boulders at one another for days on end during a fight. Scientists believe that the 150-foot tall mounds were created by eroding limestone that was stacked on clay. But to this day, the mystery of their formation remains unsolved. The Great Unconformity represents about 1 billion years of missing rock records. It appears in all kinds of rock formations all over the world. Scientists have been trying to find the answers to how and when this enormous amount of material could disappear. One of the most plausible theories involves glaciers. It could happen during the time known as Snowball Earth. That's when the planet was completely covered by ice. Then glaciers tore away hundreds of thousands of tons of rock and dirt. This left a gigantic gap up to a mile thick between the neighboring rock layers. Some geologists think that the record went missing when the supercontinent Rodinia formed and broke apart. Located on Yamal and Geeden peninsulas, these expansive pit holes were discovered in 2014. They seem to be still changing and evolving. The pits grow wider and people find them more often. Of course, there's no shortage of theories about how they appeared. Suggestions range from meteorite impacts to the activity of other civilizations. But the most common explanation is that methane gas reacted to water particles after the planet's permafrost started to melt. This resulted in bubbles of methane bursting through the ice. The craters could be thousands of years old, but nobody knows for sure.
RESPECT. Find out what it means to me. If you just sang along, congrats. You know at least one song by legendary Aretha Franklin, but a few people know a lot about her life, which was full of mysteries. The biopic Respect lifted the curtain of secrecy around the Queen of Soul. Jennifer Hudson beautifully portrayed the main character and guided the viewers through the life of the late star. Yet, there are some moments in the movie which don't correspond to reality. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, she was the fourth of 5 kids in a seriously talented family. Her dad was a Baptist preacher, and her mom was a gospel singer. When she was little, her mom sadly passed away, and her dad's job took the family to Detroit, Michigan, where Aretha's star began to shine. At 12, Aretha got her first son, and the second one followed 2 years later. Unlike in the movie, where it happens earlier. Both of the sons had Aretha's last name, as the persona of their father remained a mystery. Franklin was a true musical prodigy. She taught herself to play the piano, and at the age of 14, she was already performing in front of her father's congregation and recorded some of her earliest tracks, kickstarting her epic musical journey. Her recordings were released by a small label as an album in 1956. At the age of 18, Aretha got her father's blessing to switch to secular music and move to New York to follow a musical career. And that's another example where the movie slightly parts with reality. Although her contract with Columbia Records in 1960 became a turning point in her career, it wasn't the first professional recording for the star in the making. Her debut single was a beautiful rendition of Never Grow Old. She would come back to it several times in her career, and it was chosen as the closing track for the album Amazing Grace. One of the memorable scenes in the movie is Dinah Washington, played by Mary J. Blige, flips a table after Franklin sang one of Washington's famous songs, Unforgettable, at a nightclub. The two divas weren't exactly best friends, but Aretha wasn't the target of Dinah's anger in real life. It was another rising star, Etta James, who had the guts to sing one of Dinah's songs to her face. Back in the day, Miss D was like family, showing up at Aretha's dad's parties in Detroit. But at one of Aretha's early shows in Detroit, Washington went backstage to criticize the mess in Franklin's messing room. Aretha didn't like it, to say the least, and thought of Dinah as a diva acting out. The movie is accurate when it comes to Aretha meeting her future husband, Ted White, at one of her father's house parties. But in reality, it happened when Franklin was just a teenager, and not on the eve of her Columbia Records deal in 1960. Their relationship began a year later, the same year Aretha released her first album. They got married after several months, and Ted became her manager. The movie shows producer Jerry Wexler announcing Aretha, Queen of Soul, at one of her concerts for the first time. In real life, Aretha owed that title to a couple of DJs from Chicago. One of them pulled off a surprise Queen of Soul coronation at a concert. They even crowned her with a bejeweled crown fit for royalty. Aretha loved her new title, and it soon went viral. Later in the film, Franklin refuses to perform the song that later became a real hit because of her beliefs. Let It Be was sent to her by the Beatles themselves, offering to record it first. It took over a year in reality to convince Franklin to record the song. She warmed up to the song when she found out that Mother Mary was Paul McCartney's late mom. Still, Aretha chose another Beatles cover to release as a single, so the British band did it before her, and it forever went down in history as theirs. The culmination of the biopic is Aretha's father's emotional pep talk he gives her before recording the Amazing Grace live set. Franklin had completely forgotten to invite her father until the very last minute, but he still had some kind words for her on the second day of the concert. Some facts from the star's life weren't shown inaccurately in the biopic, but they deserve to be known. In 2006, the Super Bowl was coming to Detroit. The NFL decided to shake things up and went for the Rolling Stones and not a local singer for the halftime show. Many people disapproved of the decision, and the Queen of Soul was one of them. To make things right, the NFL invited Aretha to join forces with Aaron Neville to sing the national anthem, a Super Bowl first for her. She remembered it as an ultra-special honor. She'd be invited to perform at the legendary game day before, but she had to refuse to do it because of her fear of flying. The star developed it in the 1980s, after going through some severe turbulence in a small 2-engine plane from Atlanta back home to Detroit. Ever since, she chose to get to concerts and other events by land. Franklin even took a Fearless Flyers class but never finished it, so her aviophobia stayed with her. During her life, The Queen of Soul has won 18 Grammy Awards out of 44 nominations. She became the first woman to be featured in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She lent her majestic voice to legendary events like Dr. Martin Luther King's memorial service and Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration. And her civil rights work earned her the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005. And NASA even named an asteroid after her in 2014. Her songs remain popular even after her passing away, but they aren't the only reason Aretha is mentioned in the media. When she passed away in 2018, there was no official will to be found, so everyone believed she hadn't prepared one, and it was unclear who'd inherit roughly $6 million in real estate, cash, gold records, and furs, or her music copyrights. 9 months later, Aretha's niece Sabrina Owens, who was taking care of the estate back then, found 2 sets of handwritten papers. One, dated June 2010, was in a locked desk drawer next to record contracts and other papers. Another version, dated March 2014, was in a spiral notebook with Franklin's doodles, hiding under the couch cushions. Different states have different laws on handwritten wills. In California and Michigan, a typewritten will is valid if it has signatures from 2 witnesses. In Florida, a handwritten will must be made in the presence of a witness. So, if the star had passed away there, all her wealth would have been distributed between her children in equal shares. 6 jurors in Pontiac had the daunting task of deciding which will was legit. At the heart of the dispute were her 4 children, squabbling over what they'd inherit. The newer will meant 3 sons would split the music royalties and bank funds, while the youngest son, Kaikaf, K.A.Alf, and his kids would get the $1.2 million mansion. But the older will was a whole other story. It required Kekaf and another son, Edward, to first get a degree to earn their share. The 2 sons agreed that the newer document annulled the older version, but their half-brother Ted White didn't like that. Kekaf had an argument in their support. Their mother always did business on the couch. Ted, who preferred the option where he gets the bigger piece, argued that his mother would have left a more conventional will. It would be hiding under a lock rather than under the cushions. After 2 days of a trial, a Michigan jury ruled that the 2014 document found in the couch was valid. Despite the fact that it didn't end in his favor, Kekaf Franklin told the journalist that he was happy that a nearly 5-year legal squabble had finally come to an end. He also mentioned he loves his brother Ted with all his heart.
Care to join me on a trip down memory lane? I have an extra seat in my time machine. First stop, London in the early 1900s. If you look closely, you'll see that this city already has electric public lights. Before that, people used to light their streets with torches or oil lamps. However, those things you see inside light poles aren't the modern light bulbs we use today. At that time, city lamps did not use light bulbs yet, even though they were already invented. That's because they weren't as efficient back then, so they couldn't shed enough light to illuminate the city's dark streets. They might have been good for indoor lighting, sure, but for public use, carbon arc lamps were still a better choice at the time. Here's someone I'd like you to meet, Mr. Thomas Edison. He's mostly credited for inventing modern light bulbs. He's going to explain to us how most of these lighting inventions work. All electrical sources of light back then had a simple, basic principle. Electricity needed to pass through some sort of material. This material had to be stable and durable, and it was supposed to glow when connected to a power source. The first invention of this kind was called the arc lamp. In this contraption, the material used for lighting was carbon, and as soon as it was electrically charged, it began to vaporize. This process produced some really bright light. The man behind this invention was a British chemist named Humphrey Davy. He placed together 2 wires, a battery, and charcoal elements, which gave away enough light to illuminate the surroundings. But even those arc lamps weren't suitable for street lighting at first, mostly because they were inefficient. They needed a powerful electrical current to produce light, so they had to be equipped with large batteries to back up that amount of power. It all made arc lamps difficult to operate and also very expensive. Mr. Edison's name is the one you've certainly heard in relation to the invention of the light bulb. The truth is, his discoveries are only a part of this revolutionary invention. Other scientific breakthroughs, like those of Alessandro Volta, Humphrey Davy, and Joseph Swan, also contributed. Before moving forward with our story, let's look at how modern light bulbs work. Each of them has two primary parts. The first one is a hollow chamber, the glass part, that's filled with an inert gas. This type of gas is crucial because it does not interact with other chemical substances, creating something similar to a vacuum environment. The second part is a thin filament, or a conductive wire. It's the part of the bulb where you can see electricity. A metal called tungsten is often chosen for making filaments these days because of its very high melting point. It makes light bulbs more durable. Once you turn on a light bulb, electricity flows through the filament, which heats up the environment. This heat quickly causes the very thin tungsten filament to give off huge amounts of light. Now let's get back to our story and Mr. Edison. When looking at previous discoveries, he noticed that the problem with the light bulb's efficiency was related to its filament. To make it more practical, the filament needed to be thinner. Why? Because the thinner the filament, the less electrical current it needs to work properly. This could solve the problem with the added batteries and generators. So, by the late 1870s, Edison came up with a light bulb that featured a platinum filament in a glass vacuum bulb. Edison and his team went on to test more than 3,000 designs for light bulbs between the years 1878 and 1880. He ended up trying more than 6,000 plants to see which material would be better suited to serve as a filament. Everything was tried out, from cotton to linen and even wood. Eventually, they figured out that a carbonized bamboo filament could burn for more than 1,000 hours. They settled on this material for a while, but longer-lasting materials, like tungsten, replaced it by the early 1900s. These days, standard light bulbs can last anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 hours. But there is one light bulb that is famous for breaking all the records. The story has it that back in 1901, a small light bulb was placed on the ceiling of a fire station in Livermore, California. It was a 60-watt light bulb used at the time to illuminate the fire department's trucks, even during the day. That's why it was almost never turned off. This may be one of the reasons why it lasted as long as it did. Another reason for such longevity is its composition. The filament of this particular light bulb was made not of tungsten, but of carbon. Unlike metals, carbon conducts electricity better when heated. More so, such a filament is way thicker than those we see in modern light bulbs. Needless to say, this light bulb has been functioning ever since. It's now over 100 years old. It even has its own official website, although it hasn't been updated since 2018. These days, we call it the centennial bulb. And the reason why so many people celebrate this invention is because of its incredible ability to withstand the test of time. Wouldn't it be great if all light bulbs lasted that long? Unfortunately, they won't, because it goes against a business strategy often used these days. It's called planned obsolescence. As interesting as it may sound, it's actually a trick. It centers around products that are made to last a certain limited amount of time. These products stop working artificially, and the amount of time they function properly is set from the very beginning. Eventually, you'll need to repair or replace them, and in the long run, people end up buying more products. Let's look at the example of the centennial bulb. If all similar devices were designed to last over 100 years, people would eventually stop buying them. A whole industry would disappear, at least for the foreseeable future. So a businessman from London came up with a plan back in 1932. He named it planned obsolescence. It mentioned that selling products with a limited lifetime meant that more objects would be purchased in the long run. He thought that in the overall economy, as long as there was a stable supply and demand trade-off, it was a win-win situation. His idea saw a lot of negative reactions throughout the years, and for a good reason. I mean, it's really annoying to keep having to buy new products when it's not really necessary. Also, it means a lot of wasted products too. There are a lot of ways for a product to become outdated, and some are less obvious than you think. Look at some of the gadgets in your house, like a phone, a computer, or even a washing machine, and check if you can identify some of these examples. For example, these products may lack spare parts. These ones are purposely designed to act as a whole unit. You can't simply take it apart and replace the element that has stopped working. In other words, these products can't be fixed. Once they're broken, you simply need to replace them. Light bulbs are actually a good example of such products. Ever tried replacing a filament in a light bulb once it stopped working? I mean, the glass jar might still be useful, but there's no way you can bring a light bulb back to life at home once the filament is broken. Then there are products that simply become incompatible with other modern re-editions. It's a process we witness more and more often these days because technology is advancing at a speed we've never seen before. For example, one day, you may realize that there are no software updates available for a specific device. You might notice that if your phone is old enough, some apps just won't work anymore. That's because, in most cases, they are using newer technologies, which aren't compatible with older devices. There's a heavy snowstorm. The cold penetrates his bones. His legs are almost knee-deep in snow. Experienced hunter Joe LaBelle makes his way through the forest, covering his face from the headwind. Any other person would have already fallen and screamed in despair, but not Joe LaBelle. He can survive in any circumstances and always knows what to do. Right now, he's heading to one of the villages in the far north of Canada. This small settlement is located on Lake Anjikuni. The inhabitants of this village are Inuit, indigenous people of North America. Joe hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time. He needs a good sleep and a hot meal, which he hopes to get from the hospitable Inuits. Through trees and a white haze, he notices the silhouettes of tents. Smoke is coming from some houses. Joe will probably get there in time for lunch. He reaches the village, and at this moment, the wind calms down. The blizzard has ended. The hunter speeds up and goes toward the village, located along the frozen lake. It's strange, but there are no locals anywhere. Probably everyone is just sitting in their houses, waiting out the blizzard. "Hello!" Joe says loudly, but gets no response. Oh, great! Smoke is coming out of this tent. Joe knocks on the wall, but no one opens it. He knocks a few more times and goes inside. The little tent is empty. All things are in their places. There's a piece of cloth with needles and thread on the table. Firewood is smoldering in the fireplace. It seems that people have just left this place. Joe goes into the next tent and sees the same picture. All things are in their places, but there are no people. Joe walks past the tents and sees a pit where a bonfire once burned. There's a rope above it with the meat that the Inuit were cooking hanging on it. For some reason, they didn't eat it. Lake Anjikuni is part of a chain of waterways. Here, the Inuits fished and traded various goods. Usually, there are many people here, but now something has forced them to leave their homes. Why did they leave their things behind? And where did they go? There are no tracks around the village. All the sleds are in place. The Inuits have even left their dogs here, and dogs help them to hunt and ride sleighs. No one will leave warm clothes and dogs here when moving away, especially in severe weather. Joe LaBelle knows all this, so he concludes that something terrible has happened here. His body is shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. After going around the entire settlement, he finds not a single soul. Terrified, he leaves the village, heads for the nearest telegraph pole, and sends a message to the police. After a while, more and more people arrive. The police are trying to find traces of missing people and figure out what has happened, but there's nothing. Near the village, they find an empty grave. During the ceremony, the Inuits placed stones around the burial site. The rocks around the open pit lie untouched, which means it wasn't an animal that dug it up, but who or what needed it. About 30 people lived in the village, and they're all gone. Local residents from neighboring villages can't help, since they have no idea what has happened. The only thing that the police have noticed is unusual blue lights. In this area, the northern lights are a common phenomenon. People living here regularly see a glow in the starry sky. But the police have seen something else, pulsing blue lights. Also, other hunters have witnessed something similar. They say that some strange things were flying in the sky. This all happened in 1930. It's been almost 90 years since the disappearance of the village, and people have created a bunch of theories. The most popular of them is an attack of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the blue lights in the sky that the locals and the police saw were spaceships. Some believe that one ominous night, these ships flew to the settlement and took away all the people. In addition to these sci-fi versions, there were also more realistic ones. Internet users have found out that Joe LaBelle didn't have a hunting license. Maybe he wasn't a professional and made it all up. But at that time, many hunters didn't have a license, so Joe's words may be true. But if we try to find out where all this information came from, we'll see that the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s. But none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjakuni is true. Perhaps this entire story was made up. Now let's leave the snows of Canada and head for the hot plains of India. In this big country, there's one sinister village where people also disappeared without a trace. This happened in the first half of the 19th century. Still, locals avoid this place even now because they believe that invisible evil forces live there. Let's check and find out what happened to the village of Kuldara. It's located in the district of Rajasthan. To get there, you can use a taxi to get to the nearest village or city. The village is located far from other settlements. It looks deserted. There are only ruins. It looks like archaeologists have recently dug this place out of the ground and left it here. But this is not an ancient city. The village was abandoned more than 200 years ago. But up to that point, this place had been thriving. Kuldara was a large village. Local people were mostly farmers. They sold their agricultural products. And then, one night, everything changed. People abandoned their homes and stuff and ran away from there. No one knows why they did it, and no one knows where they went. Nobody has ever seen the inhabitants of Kuldara again. Apart from tourists, almost no one comes here. The locals are sure that the village is cursed and is the center of paranormal activity. If you ask residents of other nearby towns or read the information on the internet, you'll learn a couple of legends about this place. One popular version says that people left this village because of a lack of water. However, this version doesn't explain why the residents did it overnight and left their things behind. According to another version, the villagers ran away to save the daughter of the Kuldara chief. One local ruler fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. He threatened the locals with grave consequences if the girl rejected him. The ruler gave them 1 day to make a decision. The residents disagreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village together with the chief and his daughter. But if this is true, why did no one else see these people? They must have escaped to another settlement. In addition, they needed their things on the way there. The stories of Kuldara and Lake Anjakuni have one thing in common. People left a comfortable and safe place for an unknown reason. A similar story happened in Ireland with a small village on the island of Achill. About 40 simple houses made of stone and straw were located along the valley of Keem Bay. The village was mentioned in documents dated back to the 1830s as a group of small buildings, but today, there's practically nothing left of it, except pieces of walls and small mounds of ground. People from other settlements don't remember this village, but we know about it thanks to the records of travel writers. They describe the incredible beauty of this place and the village in their diaries. Students of the local archaeological school tried to find the answers. They started excavations and discovered that the villagers could have left the village because of hunger or some disease.
In 1945, 5 TBF Avenger aircraft took flight for a routine training exercise around the Bermuda Triangle. In the middle of the exercise, the planes were struck by intense rain and heavy winds, despite the clear weather forecast. The pilots became extremely disoriented and radioed the base to report that their navigational equipment had stopped working. The last thing the base heard was, "When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we'll all go down together," and then static. The 5 planes and their 14 crew members were never seen or heard from again. On his very first voyage to the New World in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed through the Bermuda Triangle. Columbus reported that one night, when he was on the deck of the ship, he noticed a giant light appear in the distance, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Columbus looked at his compass for direction, and it gave off erratic readings. You might have noticed that the Bermuda Triangle doesn't appear on any world map. This is because official institutions refuse to acknowledge that the area actually exists. A popular theory suggests that rogue waves are responsible for the many disappearances. Rogue waves are called extreme storm waves by scientists. They occur when different weather patterns take place at the same time and cause large, unexpected waves. Witnesses say that the waves look like giant walls of water. These waves could explain why ships go down fast and without leaving any trace. The Bermuda Triangle is home to some pretty intense and unexpected weather. Storms build up quickly and unexpectedly, then disappear soon after. If you blink, you might miss it. This could explain why few distress signals are issued. Pilots and sailors never saw the weather coming. No one knows exactly how many ships and planes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. The rough estimate is 50 ships and 20 planes. Most of the time, the disappearances had no explanation and no wreckage has ever been left behind. Another bizarre theory trying to solve the Bermuda Triangle mystery comes from Charlie Berlitz. He insists that the area is home to the lost city of Atlantis. The missing ships and planes and malfunctioning equipment, according to him, were all caused by rays of energy let out by the special energy crystals that power Atlantis. While this sounds silly, Berlitz's theory was convincing enough that over 20 million people bought his book worldwide. In the year 1800, a large sailing vessel called the USS Pickering departed from the U.S. on its way to the West Indies. The ship sailed into the Bermuda Triangle along with its 90-man crew and was never heard from again. The USS Pickering was the first ever confirmed ship to vanish in the Bermuda Triangle. It's believed that the ship was taken out by a storm, but because no wreckage was ever found, we'll never know for sure. When the TBF Avenger planes went missing, a massive search operation was conducted. Boats and planes searched the Bermuda Triangle for any signs of the aircraft. One of the boats searching was a PBM-5 Mariner airboat. The airboat took flight at 7:27 p.m. and called in a routine radio message 3 minutes later. Then, it was never heard from again. No trace was ever found of the rescue airboat or the 5 Avenger aircraft. An enormous investigation was launched into the disappearance of all these vehicles, but nothing was ever discovered. This particular area of the ocean is one of the most heavily traveled shipping routes in the world. Some skeptics believe that this fact solves the mystery. Statistically, the busier the area, the higher the frequency of accidents and disappearances. While this makes sense, it's not the frequency of disappearances that's responsible for the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. It's the lack of explanation or wreckage found. On the ocean floor, decomposing organisms let off large concentrations of methane gas that gets trapped under the water. This gas can build up until, boom, it ruptures. The gas surges up to the surface and erupts. If a ship was in the area of one of these ruptures, the water would become much less dense and cause the ship to sink rapidly and without warning. Scientists believe this could be the cause of the many disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. While this theory makes a lot of sense, it doesn't seem too likely. The U.S. Geological Survey has stated that no large releases of gas are believed to have occurred in this area for the past 15,000 years. The ocean floor is made of rocks containing a lot of magnetite. It's more like iron. Magnetic fields react to high concentrations of magnetite on the ocean floor, which may start a sort of conflict between the two. It can often lead to various weather anomalies and, as a result, navigation issues. And, naturally, any changes in the ocean floor or the Earth's magnetic fields influence the Bermuda Triangle a lot. Since the magnetic field is constantly moving, it might be also taking the Bermuda Triangle with it. Now that people know where the triangle is, it's easy to avoid it. It supposedly moves eastward together with the magnetic poles, but scientists still can't answer where exactly it will be in a couple of years. Some people blame all the disasters on the extraterrestrial paranormal activity. Others suppose it's all about raging natural phenomena. There's another triangle in Lake Michigan. Just like the one near Bermuda, the Michigan Triangle got its shady reputation for some disappearances. The first recorded one dates back to 1679. A large vessel, one of the largest of that time, set out on an expedition. Yet, once it got in the sinister triangle, it never came back. Much later, an aircraft disappeared in this triangle. The skies are usually very clear there, but back in 1883, some people witnessed abnormal things in the area. Some claim to have seen large blocks of ice falling from the skies, and the crew even managed to save one as hard proof. Meanwhile, the Pacific Ocean Mystery Area is another sinister triangle. Off the south coast of Japan, not far away from Tokyo, there's a sea where plenty of ships met their doom, disappearing without a trace in these waters. They call it the Devil's Triangle. Some scientists believe the cause of anomalies is the environmental changes. Also, there's a really high concentration of methane hydrates on the bottom of the ocean in the Pacific Triangle area. You're deviating from your original course and sailing in the wrong direction. There's the Caribbean Sea near the triangle, peppered with small islands. The seafloor here isn't deep. The ship can get in shallow waters. And now the ship is stuck on a shoal, and you have no idea where you are. If this were the 21st century, the ship's captain would be able to reach the shore using GPS and other modern navigation. But the most interesting thing is that the compass would work correctly this time, since the magnetic North Pole hasn't already coincided with the true one for a long time in the territory of the Bermuda Triangle. The agonic line is somewhere far away from here. There are no problems with navigation now, but for some reason, this is where ships disappear. In fact, not just here. Throughout the Atlantic Ocean, there are places where many more ships were gone. The Bermuda Triangle is not even in the top 10 of such places. One of the main reasons why many ships are lost here is that one of the most popular shipping routes in the Atlantic passes through the Bermuda Triangle. And the more ships in one place, the more shipwrecks. Simple probability. Then, it just starts getting weird. Other theories say that there's a space-time rift in this region. Ships and planes fall into this rift and end up in the past or the future. But for some reason, there's not a single proof of this myth. There's no reason to think that the rift is hidden somewhere here. The base of an extraterrestrial civilization is located in the Bermuda Triangle. Visitors from other galaxies steal sea vessels along with the crew, so no one finds the wreckage of the ships. This is also a popular myth that has no scientific justification. The Kraken lives somewhere in the triangle. It's a huge squid that sinks ships and also is a legend that sailors tell each other. However, gigantic squids live in the depths of the ocean. They can grow to the size of half a train car, but no cases have ever been recorded where they sunk a large vessel. And in the area of the Bermuda Triangle, they have never ever been seen. People in the past didn't know about the existence of these creatures, so when they saw them for the first time, they described them as huge, terrible monsters. Giant squids are some of the most elusive creatures on Earth, and scientists had to use sonar equipment to find them. They don't like to leave the dark depths and are likely to be afraid of the sound of any ship. So, that should squash the squid as a suspect.
Ships and planes disappearing without a trace. Passengers never seen or heard from again. Reports of strange lights in the sky. No, these aren't scenes from an upcoming Hollywood blockbuster, but some of the strange occurrences reported for over a century in an area ominously dubbed the Graveyard of Lake Ontario, also referred to as Canada's Bermuda Triangle, or the Marysburg Vortex. It stretches across a portion of Lake Ontario from Kingston to Prince Edward County in Canada, and down to Oswego, New York in the US. The tales about this area can be as chilling as the frigid lake water on which they took place. The most unsettling story involves the schooner called the Bavaria. It was 1889, and the ship was being towed across the lake. Rough waters severed the tow rope, and the Bavaria floated away. Luckily, the schooner was later found safe and fully intact. But there was one thing missing: the crew. Not a single person was found on board. What makes the story even more bizarre is that the dinner table was set, a loaf of bread was discovered, freshly baked, and the captain's money and his papers were fully accounted for. There was even a pet canary happily chirping away as if nothing was amiss. What happened to the crew? We may never know. And this was not a unique incident. Just over a decade later, in 1900, 3 ships, the Annie Minnis, the Picton, and the Acacia, were sailing across the lake. But only 2 would make it to their final destination. The third one, the Picton, was speeding ahead of the others when it simply vanished. According to a cook on the Annie Minnis, "We were well out into the lake and making good time when all of a sudden we saw the Picton's topsails coming off, and then her lower sails settled, and then, while we stood and watched, the Picton just disappeared." It's possible that the ship sank, as there was some wreckage later seen in the water, but the ship itself was never found, and none of its crew ever located. A few weeks later, a bottle with a note inside was discovered in Sackett's Harbor, New York. The note was from Captain Sidley of the Picton. "Have lashed Vesey to me with heaving line, so that we will be found together." Vesey was the captain's 12-year-old son. The note creates more questions than answers. If the witnesses were correct, the ship's disappearance was quite quick. When did Captain Sidley know he was in danger? Why not signal for help if he had any warning? And when did he have time to write a note, bottle it, and tie himself to his son? It truly is a mystery. And it was not just ships that ran afoul of the strange forces in the area. Planes also struggled to make it through in one piece. In 1975, Ron Scott flew out from the Picton Airport in his Cessna 172. As he entered the Marysburg Vortex, his plane banked to the side. For several seconds, he was unable to right the plane, but once he did, the same force banked him to the other side. Again, he was stuck there for a few seconds, unable to control his plane. A skilled pilot, he had never experienced anything like it before. He was certainly luckier than Royal Canadian Air Force pilot Barry Allen Newman. Newman was at the same spot back in 1952, when he lost control of his jet and crashed into the lake. To this day, his body has not been found. In total, over 270 ships and at least 40 planes have met a tragic end in this area. And adding to the mystery, sometimes people report a series of bright lights or orbs, or a dark ship hovering in the sky. These are even harder to explain. Witnesses willing to report them are adamant they are true. Sid Wells said he watched a strange shape like a multifaceted diamond slowly spinning in the sky, and then it just disappeared. Others claim to have seen it too. Of course, the Marysburg Vortex is just one of several places around the world known as vile vortices, a term coined by biologist and writer Ivan T. Sanderson. He discovered 12 other equally spaced areas on the surface of Earth where funny things happen. The best known of these, of course, is the dreaded Bermuda Triangle. Situated in the Atlantic Ocean between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico, it has been blamed for the disappearance of thousands of people. They went in, on boats or in planes, but they never came out. Even the explorer Christopher Columbus experienced the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle during his first voyage to America in 1492. He said the compasses pointed in the wrong direction, the sea levels seemed to change dramatically, and he even spotted strange lights in the sky. In 1918, the USS Cyclops, which was one of the US Navy's biggest fuel ships, disappeared there. Since the 309 crew members were declared lost at sea when the Cyclops vanished, it's seen as the largest loss of life in the history of the US Navy in a single incident. At the time, the weather was good. The one message sent that day from the ship indicated no issues or concerns, and a distress signal was never sent. A thorough naval investigation followed. Its conclusion? Many theories have been advanced, but none that satisfactorily accounts for the ship's disappearance. In other words, the investigators were stumped. There's also the Dragon's Triangle, located in the Pacific Ocean. The most disturbing story involves a group of Japanese vessels that disappeared in the 1950s. When researchers were sent to investigate what happened, they too disappeared. In each case, it's impossible to truly know what occurred, and it's easy to get caught up in stories of giant sea monsters lurking beneath the waves. Who doesn't like a good scare? And Sanderson was willing to accept the possibility of such stories being true. He believed the vile vortices that he studied could be explained by anything from a wrinkle in the space-time continuum to magnetic abnormalities to underwater people. Of course, Sanderson was not only a huge fan of strange places, he also wrote about strange creatures like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. His skills as an impartial scientist are questionable, though. In 1948, he claimed that some three-toed footprints found at Clearwater Beach in Florida were proof of 15-foot-tall penguins, arguing that they were impossible to fake. In 1988, Tony Singerini revealed that he and his friend, attaching some cast-iron feet to his high-top sneakers, were behind the giant penguin hoax. So maybe Sanderson isn't the most reliable source after all, but there are also some very compelling and wholly natural explanations. Let's look specifically at the Marysburg Vortex. It's entirely possible that ships like the Bavaria and the Picton were done in by a mix of bad luck and bad weather. Unsettled weather is certainly not uncommon on Lake Ontario, and flash storms on the open water can prove dangerous to the most skilled sailor. And even today, with advances in weather forecasting, we get it wrong all the time. Back then, there was no way to predict that a storm was just around the corner. And the weather was just one issue. Historian Mark Seguin said that the area was always known to be dangerous, as the lakebed quickly becomes shallow along the eastern shore. There are also small rocky islands and shoals scattered throughout the area, making sailing a risky venture, especially for larger vessels or those weighed down by heavy cargo. By the mid-20th century, modern weather forecasting and improved shipbuilding alleviated most of the hazards of the Great Lakes shipping, resulting in fewer losses. The last major shipwreck in any of the Great Lakes was that of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, which sank off the coast of Lake Superior in 1975, with 29 crew members going down with it. It seems the vortex is no match for human progress. And as for lights or images in the sky, in most cases, it's the result of an interesting phenomenon called thermal or temperature inversion. When this happens, a layer of warm air becomes trapped under cold air. This can result in mirages or reflections. So, a light on the ground that is miles away can be reflected in the sky, giving the impression of a flying object. Other parts of the mystery may be solved with a little time. Lake Ontario's freshwater and frigid temperatures help preserve the ships and planes that came to rest there. As divers and researchers continue to explore the area, maybe we'll finally learn the fate of the Bavaria, the Picton, Captain Sidley, and his son.
And now we're off to almost 5,000 years ago. Let me take you to ancient Egypt, where back in 2550 BC, guess what? The construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza started. People learned to build cathedrals and skyscrapers, but it wasn't until recently that these massive buildings appeared. It's still a mystery to even modern scientists how these pyramids were built 5,000 years ago. No wonder they are one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They're also the oldest of them and the only wonder of the ancient world that still exists in the 21st century. It must have taken a lot of cooperation to build a thing that massive, even for today's metrics. But the Giza pyramids weren't the first pyramids ever. The first one, called the Step Pyramid, was built around 80 years before the first Pyramid of Giza in 2630 BC for King Djoser. It wasn't meant to be extraordinary, but ended up being quite impressive. It was a pyramid of 6 stepped layers of stone. It was 204 feet high, which is as tall as a 19-story building. And it was the tallest building that existed at that time. It wasn't just a pyramid though, it was surrounded by a whole complex of buildings, including even courtyards. In ancient Egypt, people believed in the afterlife, so everyone, especially kings, wanted to make sure they had everything they needed to get ready for it. Here's why the pyramid complex was perfectly supplied with a lot of objects people used every day. The complex included a pyramid and a kind of a palace. Those buildings had many things the king loved and might need one day, like furniture, food, and gold vessels. After Djoser, building pyramids became common practice, but many pyramids weren't finished. It would usually take about 20 years to build one, but many rulers reigned way less than that. Overall, there are more than 100 pyramids. The most famous pyramids are the Great Pyramids of Giza. The first one and the biggest one was built for Pharaoh Khufu, around 2550 BC. Initially, it was 481 feet tall, which is as tall as a 40-story building. The second pyramid was built for Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre, around 2520 BC. It's just a bit shorter, usually standing at 471 feet high, a 39-story building. This is the pyramid with the famous statue of the Sphinx. Sphinxes have a lion's body and a human head. They were built to guard important areas. This one has the head of Pharaoh Khafre and is guarding his pyramid, facing the sunrise. The Sphinx is most well known and is one of the world's biggest and oldest statues. Originally, it had red color and did have a nose. It's still possible to see the trace of red pigment by its ears. But no one knows exactly when the nose disappeared. For some time, the Sphinx was sort of hidden underground, being covered with sand up to its shoulders. Luckily, in the early 1800s, an adventurer with a team of 160 people dug it out. The third Pyramid of Giza is the smallest one, being more than twice shorter. Originally, it was 218 feet high, about the height of a 20-story building. Built in 2490 BC, it was a pyramid for Khafre's son, Menkaure. The pyramids are designed to align with the points of the compass, and their sides symbolize the rays of the sun. But back at the time, there were no compasses. Ancient Egyptians figured out the directions themselves, and with amazing precision. To align the pyramids, they used 2 constellations. Originally, the pyramids were covered in smooth white limestone and had a gold-silver top to reflect the sun. Later, the white limestone was taken from the pyramids by other kings and used for other buildings. Scientists estimated that ancient Egyptians used about 2.3 million stone blocks to build the first pyramid. Each block weighed more than 1 ton. This is the weight of a rhino. Some blocks were even bigger, being almost as heavy as an elephant. 4.5 millennium ago, there was no modern equipment to help build it. There were no machines, no wheels, and even no steel. The only metal available to them was copper. Even today, scientists aren't sure how the Egyptians managed to build the pyramids. There are no records left that would shed light on it. Some even think that Egyptians wanted to keep it as their secret and didn't even record it on purpose. Many believe that poor people and foreigners built the pyramids, but it's not true. Actually, the builders were very skilled workers, and they were fed and paid well. The archaeologists claim that the builders lived in a nearby temporary city and were a highly organized community with a strong leader. Scientists say that around 20,000 people worked on each pyramid complex, and it took about 20 years to build each. It probably was a national project. The construction site was large in resources, and food and essentials were likely to be contributed from all parts of Egypt. Even with all that support, it remains unclear how people managed to cut, transport, and assemble those huge stones. One of the theories suggests the stones were most likely transported on boats down the Nile River. Then, there was a harder part. They had to be moved to the construction site. For that, they probably used wooden sleds. It wasn't very hard to pull them because the sand mixed with the right amount of water was pretty slick, and 10 people could move a sled even with a rock weighing 1 ton pretty easily. Finally, one last problem. The stones had to be lifted and put into place. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of the ramps system that dates back to when the pyramids were built. Most likely, the Egyptians designed a unique system to move and pull huge stone blocks, but no one knows what it looked like exactly. The most common opinion is that there were several ramps around the pyramid to help move the blocks. The ramp was growing with the pyramid getting higher. They suppose people were walking up the stairs, pulling the stone on the wooden sled up in the middle on the sandy ramp. But this is just one of the options. Others say that the ramps were going around the pyramid. Some say the ramps were inside the pyramid. But we'll never know for sure, and it'll forever remain a mystery, just like the ancient Egyptians wanted. Surprisingly, there's not much inside the pyramids. Most of it is just solid stone with very little open space. But let's take a quick look inside the biggest of the pyramids of Giza. From the entrance, there are 2 stairs, one going down and the other one going up. The descending one takes you to a chamber located underground. That's where the pharaohs are, but not in this pyramid because Khufu wanted to stay higher. The underground room is partly unfinished. The room with Khufu's sarcophagus is called the King's Chamber. It's upstairs and then through the tall and long Grand Gallery. Below the King's Chamber, there's a room called the Queen's Chamber. There are no queens though, and no one is sure why the room is called this. Unfortunately, none of these have any hieroglyphs on the wall. They're just bare. If you want to see them, you should go to the other rooms that are decorated. Those pieces of art are depictions of ancient Egypt's culture and daily life. The texts allow researchers to study their language and grammar. Sadly, the treasures that once were here in the pyramid are long stolen. From that room, there are several tunnels for an unknown purpose. There are many tunnels and passages inside the pyramids. There are many chambers and shafts and secret ways. Scientists have been sending little robots with cameras there for some decades already. And the robots did discover another chamber a bit upstairs with hieroglyphs on the walls. But even today, much of the pyramids is still unknown, and there's no so-called building plan of the pyramids. Egyptians did create a mystery no one can crack for 4,500 years already. Scientists recently started to X-ray the pyramid to learn what's inside it without entering it and its narrow, mysterious tunnels.
The coldest part of our planet, Antarctica, keeps surprising us. Take a look at this waterfall named Blood Falls. Reddish water falls from the white ice. Scientists concluded that the color is related to iron. The water coming from the glacier oxidizes and rusts when it's exposed to oxygen, and the red color occurs. Step on Mount Gandik. It lays eggs. Well, maybe not real eggs, but the stones certainly look like dinosaur eggs. That's why the mountain got its fame. Let's call them stone eggs, formed in one part of the mountain over 500 million years ago. Interestingly, this phenomenon repeats once every 30 years. Eggs come out in various sizes and shades. The stones appear on the surface of the cliff. A study made in the area has revealed that the composition of the stones of the cliff isn't similar to other parts of the mountain. Here, calcareous rocks rule. They're more prone to erosion. They ripen off day by day. It took 3 decades for the stones to get to the egg shape. Yet, it's still a mystery how these rock formations can be so perfectly spherical and smooth. According to scientists, every stone egg has an organic core. They're made of shells, plant remains, fish teeth, and skeletons. Maybe this has something to do with it. Gulu village is close to the stone eggs. Locals believe that these eggs are sacred. Villagers associate it with good fortune. In fact, nearly every family has one of these eggs in their house. Unfortunately, there are only about 70 eggs left, so if you want to see them, you gotta hurry up. The Richet structure is a circular geological phenomenon in the Sahara Desert near Mauritania. It's made out of rocks in layers, and these layers look very much like rings. No wonder the unique structure even got NASA's attention. Up from the sky, the geological feature seems to be swirling and spinning. Scientists are still not sure how these rings got there. Some say it was an asteroid impact. Many others believe that it was a natural geological process. To them, the Richat structure is an uplifted and eroded dome. Geologists often classify it as a domed anticline. The scientists discovered that the rocks at the center are older than the ring-shaped outer rocks, so it seems like the stones have been eroded to flat rock layers. Anyway, there's no valid explanation for this phenomenon, and the 28-mile-long mystery of the Sahara is still to be solved. Number 4 is Rapa Nui, or Isla de Pascua, but I bet you know it as Easter Island. Yeah, it's got 3 names. It was discovered by Jacob Roggeveen, who actually never intended to look for that island. He just casually landed there one Sunday. That's where the name comes from. Jacob was supposed to find Terra Australis. Disclaimer, it's not Australia. This one never existed and was nothing but a hypothetical continent. Plus, he wanted to peek at Davis Land, which was believed to have once been seen by Edward Davis, the pirate, not Edward Davis, the saxophone player. Jacob failed at that too, though nobody ever saw that island except for the pirate Davis. Jacob may have failed to discover some lands he wanted to, but he discovered Easter Island instead. This is an island and special territory of Chile, located in the southeastern Pacific Ocean. It's on my list because nearly 1,000 stone statues called moai were found there. They were created by the Rapa Nui people. Nearly all statues represent gigantic heads, but there are also a small number of figures kneeling with their hands over their stomachs. Each statue represented chiefs or other important members of Easter Island society. To curve those statues, the locals used volcanic stones that were softened. Our next stop is the gateway to the underworld. Nah, don't worry. This is just how people labeled Darvaza gas crater in Turkmenistan. This giant natural gas crater has been there for 5 decades. This crater is continuously burning gases. The president of the country wants experts to find a way to extinguish this continuous firing pit. This site was created by people accidentally in 1971 while working on a natural gas project. Ever since then, the flames have been on, and it's become a tourist attraction. Mysterious constructions are sometimes built in our era, too. We don't have to go millions of years ago to long-gone civilizations. Edward Leedskallen single-handedly built a structure called Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida. He didn't use any large machinery. He carved and sculpted more than 1,100 tons of coral rock in 28 years until 1951. It's a mystery how he managed to do it all by himself. Leedskallen sculpted the sedimentary rock into different objects, such as walls, tables, chairs, a fountain, and a sundial. There's of course a legend behind this mystery too. He was inspired to build the structure after being abandoned by his fiancée on their wedding day. Uh-oh, runaway bride. Well, he wanted to prove his love to her and the world, so he wanted to do something extraordinary. Well, he definitely nailed it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the mystery of the Namibian fairy circles. There are millions of circular patches in hundreds of miles, ranging from 10 to 65 feet in diameter. They're called fairy circles because they look like a fairy or an otherworldly creature made them. These are essentially oval-shaped soil surrounded by grass. There are a lot of local beliefs surrounding the creator of these marks, yet science says something else. Biologists and mathematicians have been puzzled by the mystery of the Namibian fairy circles for decades. There is more than one theory to explain this phenomenon. Here's one popular theory. The water is limited in the desert, so plants compete to reach the water. Some plants expand and thrive into a patch, but smaller plants nearby cannot get the necessary water to live. In the end, some vegetation disappears, and the remaining ones stay at the patch's edges. That's why they form such regular distant gaps. What if I tell you that there is a hill in Leh City, India, where instead of rolling downwards, things roll uphill? It's an optical illusion. The road looks like it's a sloping hill because of its surrounding landscapes, yet the road actually goes down. These kinds of hills are called magnetic hills or gravity hills. Scientific explanations vary. The most common theory says that the hill has such a strong magnetic force that it can pull cars in the vicinity. Now, how about seeing some flaming rocks? Yanartash spread over an area of over 3 square miles. The place is located on a rocky mountain in southwest Turkey near the town of Çağrıoğlu. Yanartash got its name from its appearance. It literally means flaming stone. The rocks have been flaming for at least 2,500 years, and they'll probably keep burning for the coming decades. The mountain where the rocks are is an inactive volcano, so it's full of tiny fumaroles that release gases such as methane. The gas ignites when it comes into contact with oxygen and creates the flaming effect. And by the way, back in the day, sailors used the flames as a natural lighthouse, as it's really close to the sea. Today, it's more of a tourist attraction, though. Hikers love it too. Now, walk on this frozen Lake Abraham in Canada. In winter, the frozen water gets filled with ice bubbles. It looks magical, but these white orbs aren't that safe. They consist of flammable methane gas. Ew. Beauty can be misleading. The next one is from Racetrack, Death Valley, USA. There is a dry lake bed with moving rocks. Now these odd rocks look as if they've been pushed or dragged by someone or something. They leave both a trail and a mystery behind. The force behind all this is now understood. Surprise! It's the wind and some ice. Scientists say the wind pushes the rocks during brief windows when the soil is covered with ice. Now, I can't help but notice that many mysterious things on Earth involve stones or rocks, or methane. Which one of these phenomena is your favorite? Now in space, inky darkness between blinding points of light does a great job. It hides black holes, gaping, hungry, and scary. Their blackness makes it really difficult for astronomers to find detailed information about these space monsters. When a powerful and massive star reaches the end of its life, it can't just fade into nothingness. One of the most likely scenarios, the star will run out of its nuclear fuel. Then, in a blazing flash of light, it'll collapse under its own gravity. If the star was large enough, it'll turn into a black hole. There's a hypothetical type of black hole called primordial. Scientists have never gotten any real proof of their existence. These holes are insanely old and quite tiny, by black hole standards, that is. Astronomers believe they could appear several milliseconds after the Big Bang. At that time, stars and galaxies weren't born yet. It means primordial black holes probably witnessed the entire history of the universe. By now, the smallest primordial black holes have most likely evaporated away, but the bigger ones can still be scattered out there in space. But how did primordial black holes appear in the first place? In the very beginning, space wasn't the same. In some regions, it was hotter. In others, cooler. And some areas were extremely dense. Scientists believe these dense spots could collapse into primordial black holes. The most curious thing, though? These holes might be so small exactly because they popped up right after the Big Bang. The longer it took a black hole to appear, the larger it was. The mass difference between older, smaller, and younger, bigger black holes was incredible. Compare the mass 1,000 times greater than our sun's and that of a jelly bean. Now you get it. There was a theory that primordial black holes could actually be dark matter. This matter is believed to make up around 80% of the mass of the observable universe. Astronomers can't see this bizarre ingredient directly, since it doesn't emit light or any kind of energy. The idea remained unpopular for decades, but recently, scientists have realized there are many more black holes in the universe than they used to think, and it means the theory might actually work. And the vast and still hidden from us population of Big Bang black holes could not only make up but be dark matter. After all, astronomers haven't discovered a single dark matter particle yet, even after decades of searching. Some scientists argue that dark matter can't be tons of multi-sized primordial black holes. They would collide far too often for this to work out. Others object that black holes might exist in twos, and then a third one can always approach the pair and replace one of the initial holes. After all, our universe is swarming with black holes, and there's no lack of them. This process would repeat again and again, meaning there would be almost no merges or collisions. Primordial black holes might stay in clusters the size of the distance between our Sun and the nearest star. Each of these clusters can be home to thousands of black holes, all crammed together. A 30 solar mass monster of a black hole might sit at the center, with more common stellar ones occupying the rest of the space. Such clusters can be everywhere astronomers think dark matter is. But so far, this is still only an exciting theory, and some scientists don't support it yet. More data is needed. Now, black holes sometimes behave like massive galactic volcanoes. From time to time, they flare up, but instead of spewing lava, they produce enormous amounts of energy, and it makes gaping holes in the surrounding material and gas. A short while ago, scientists discovered one of the largest craters in the universe. Radio and X-ray telescopes detected a supermassive black hole that threw a temper tantrum many years ago. It happened in a galaxy cluster about 390 million light-years away from Earth. The crater left behind, which was actually a hole punched in the cluster's hot gas, could fit 15 Milky Way galaxies. Whoa. Recently, astronomers have found out that one of the most massive stars in the neighborhood might just have vanished. The star used to hover in space 75 million light-years away from Earth. It's usually too far away for scientists to clearly see individual stars, unless they're really massive, like the one we're talking about. It was gigantic and shining 2.5 million times brighter than our Sun. For the last time, astronomers saw the star's light in 2011, but when they decided to examine it more closely several years later, they couldn't find it. Such huge stars usually go out in an extremely bright supernova, but nothing here, which puzzled the scientists to no end. There's a theory it collapsed into a black hole, and it happened without triggering a supernova first. It does occur among stars nearing the end of their lives, but very rarely. KB 141b is a planet outside of our solar system. At first glance, it's not that different from Earth. It has liquid oceans that evaporate into clouds, condense, and get back to the surface as rain. But instead of water, this all happens with rock. The surface of the exoplanet is covered with lava seas tens of miles deep. The temperature on K2-141b reaches 5,000 degrees during the day. That's hot enough for the magma in the oceans to vaporize into the atmosphere. Then, supersonic winds, which can move at the speed of 1 mile per second, carry this rock vapor to the planet's night side. The vaporized magma cools down, becomes liquid again, and falls as a rocky rain. Well, looks like we're gonna need a bigger bumbershoot. A star in the galaxy GSN 069 might turn into a planet the size of Jupiter in the next trillion years or so, all thanks to the star's regular encounters with a black hole. First, astronomers noticed bizarre X-ray bursts. Those were super bright and went off every 9 hours. After examining this phenomenon, the researchers realized it was a star getting flung in a unique orbit around a black hole, and the flashes they saw were the material being slurped off the star's surface. It happened every time the star darted past its greedy host. Over millions of years, the black hole has already transformed the red giant into a white dwarf, and the process isn't going to stop anytime soon. Astronomers have recently discovered some traces of phosphine in Venus's atmosphere. On Earth, this colorless and flammable gas is often found near microbes. That's why a new theory claims there might be life on Venus. But if there is, it could only appear high in the clouds, because no living organism would be able to survive the planet's extreme environment. Its surface is incredibly dry, with no liquid water, and the pressure 90 times greater than that on Earth's surface. The temperatures there reach almost 900 degrees, hot enough to melt certain metals. So that's a no? Methane, a gas that's usually produced by living things, was found on Mars in 2013. European Space Agency's Mars Express spacecraft detected it in Gale Crater near the Martian equator. This discovery might one day answer the question if there's life on Mars. Asteroid 2019 OK scared scientists by sneaking up on our planet in July of 2019. This rather large rock, up to 400 feet across, appeared seemingly out of nowhere. It traveled uncomfortably close to the Earth, a mere 45,000 miles away. That's less than 1/5 of the distance to the Moon. The Sun's outer layer is way hotter than its surface. The temperatures vary from 10,000 degrees close to the surface and a mind-boggling 1 million degrees in the corona. That's the Sun's outermost layer. The reason for this phenomenon might be nanoflares. Those are regular, powerful bursts of heat from the star. Another theory blames the layer that lies just beneath the Sun's surface. It seems to generate a weak magnetic field. That's why, when the energy from this layer leaves the Sun, it heats the corona through a mesh of magnetic branches and roots. The Moon might still be shrinking. Our planet's natural satellite has become 150 feet skinnier than it used to be several hundred million years ago. If its insides keep cooling, it might explain the quakes shaking the Moon's surface. In 2019, NASA's InSight lander, whose goal was to study the interior of Mars, registered the first Mars quake ever. These quakes were coming fast, about 2 per day. Most of them were tiny. You wouldn't even feel them if they happened on our planet. So far, more than 300 Mars quakes have been detected. Those are the first quakes on any space body other than the Earth and the Moon. Another mysterious phenomenon discovered by the mission was bizarre magnetic pulses. They occurred every midnight around the lander. It's still unclear what those pulses are. Maybe after midnight they're going to let it all hang out, or something. Pluto's atmosphere rises much higher above the surface of the dwarf planet than, let's say, Earth's. It also has more than 20 layers, all of them freezing cold and extremely condensed. Oh, by the way, our Moon also has some sort of atmosphere. Called an exosphere, it consists of helium, neon, and argon. It's 10 trillion times less dense than Earth's atmosphere. Or, really thin.
It was a pitch-dark night, and we were out for a walk. Suddenly, a bright white light came from the train tracks. It was getting closer and closer before it reached the woods and suddenly faded away in the distance. This story, told by hundreds of witnesses, sounds quite normal until you find out those train tracks have long been abandoned and torn out. The last train that could have been the source of light had departed many years ago. The mysterious ghost train became the main site of St. Louis, a little village in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. There are just around 400 people living there, and hundreds visited to see the St. Louis light. It was featured in books and online, and was on TV shows like Unsolved Mysteries. For decades, no one could explain what it really was. Some people spotted a white light. Others said they'd seen a red one. An urban legend explained the red light was a lantern carried by a ghost of a train conductor who had lost his life one night examining the tracks. Scientists tried to debunk both ghost-involving theories, but failed. Then, 2 high school students from northern Saskatchewan decided to jump in. They first witnessed the ghost train on a road trip to St. Louis. One of the girls said it must have been car headlights, but she needed evidence to prove that. Together with her friend, she decided to find an answer and make it their science fair project. They made several field trips to St. Louis for research. The young Ghostbusters used a detailed map, a compass, and a GPS system, which was pretty rare back in 2001. The girls found the location from where the ghost light was seen best of all. Then, they drew a straight line on the map to where the light was coming from and marked all roads next to or on the line. One of the girls' father agreed to help them. He parked his car at various locations near the lines and flashed his headlights. The girls didn't see them, as all the places seemed to be too low. Finally, they found a short hilltop highway stretch. For 20 minutes, the dad was flashing his lights on and off, and every time the lights went on, the girls could spot the ghost train. When he turned the car around, they saw the mysterious red light as well. The spot was rather far away from the track, so it was possible to see it thanks to diffraction. The light passed through a little opening, maybe the trees, and became larger. The smart girls received gold medals at the science fair for their project. 10 years later, a similar story happened in Anson, Texas. Each night, the locals noticed a mysterious light at one spot of the highway. They called it Anson Light and believed it was a mother with a lantern searching for her son. He'd disappeared in a snowstorm a long time ago. His mom went looking for him and never came back either. A group of students didn't believe in this beautiful story and decided to find the source of light with their iPhones. They followed Google Maps down the dirt road to a highway that they thought to be the light source. Halfway to the light, it was already clear it was really coming from cars and not a mother with a lantern. It's easy to be a ghostbuster outside with your friends, but what if you had a ghost in your own home? This is what happened to a family who moved into an old house in 1921. The house was huge, with gas lights, no electricity, and many passageways. Just a classic movie haunted house. One morning, the lady who went down in records as Mrs. H heard footsteps over her head when she was home alone. She rushed upstairs and found an empty room. She checked every room and also looked one floor up. It was all empty. Then, she started hearing strange noises when she was in bed at night. It sounded like someone was moving furniture and china and sighed in the silence. Whatever was haunting the family was getting braver and braver. It followed them along the halls. It felt like it was about to approach them and come into contact. One of the children of Mrs. H once ran into her room and asked why she was calling him. She said it must have been the wind, but the child was positive it was someone's voice. The plants didn't live long in that house. Finally, the scariest thing happened. Mrs. H woke up one night and clearly saw a man and a woman in her room. She had to stop it all somehow, so she asked her brother-in-law for help. He did his research and suggested it could be a carbon monoxide leak. This colorless, odorless, and tasteless gas had caused similar visions in other people. When they checked the gas, they found the gas was coming out of the furnace and into the room instead of going out through the chimney. It gave the family headaches, hallucinations, dizziness, and other unpleasant symptoms. Some ghosts leave fingerprints behind, or so says the San Antonio legend. According to it, in 1938, a school bus was driving through a rough snowstorm and got stuck on the train tracks. When the train crew saw the bus, they did their best to stop, but it was impossible to avoid the collision. No one in the bus had survived in that accident, and ever since, the ghosts of those people are protecting others from the same fate. Hundreds of people have visited the spot ever since to play with destiny. They leave the car in neutral on so-called ghost tracks and wait for the ghosts to come and help them out. Some people put baby powder on their cars to have fingerprints as evidence. And they do see the fingerprints once they get out of the car. Turns out there's a logical explanation for this one as well. There's an incline on the tracks, so when the car moves a bit, you can see your own fingerprints in baby powder. And the original story that inspired the legend didn't even happen in San Antonio, but in Salt Lake City, Utah. Something unexplainable was happening on the campus of Coventry University in England. Whoever visited the 14th century cellar ran out of it in fear. They said they'd seen a ghost of a woman. One lecturer at the school, who was also a part-time ghostbuster, decided to debunk the mystery. He was once working at his lab when he felt the presence of someone else. He was brave enough to do research in the cellar and found out the reason for all this madness was what he called the fear frequency. The levels of sound frequency in the cellar were so high that they made people see optical illusions, feel anxiety, and get chills down the spine. A similar effect makes you hear humming of a glass when you're running a damp finger on it. A small village of Kalachi in Kazakhstan has become home to a unique, mysterious sickness nicknamed the sleep hollow. back in 2013, the first villagers got affected by it. They were doing their regular routine, biking, going to work, or chatting with friends, when suddenly they'd fall asleep. It all looked similar: slurred speech, lightheadedness, and then boom! Some of them only woke up after 6 days of loud snoring. And when they did, they didn't remember anything that happened to them and experienced weakness and headaches. The Sleeping Beauty-style sickness affected people of all ages, including kids, and even a cat named Marquise. Its owner said the cat started attacking walls, furniture, and the family dog. Then it dozed off and was snoring like a human for hours. More than 150 people got the sleep hollow in 3 years. Doctors and sleep disorder experts struggled to find a solution. A lot of people blamed possible radiation from nearby uranium mines. Kazakhstan's doctors checked over 7,000 homes, but found the radiation levels weren't high enough to cause it. They also checked water supply in the area for heavy metals and bacteria, and it was all right as well. Then, the former head of the uranium mine suggested the gas was seeping through the ground. Scientists tested this theory, and it turned out to be the answer. The dangerous gas was in the air, and it took down the amount of oxygen, making people fall asleep. Families started moving out one by one from that sleepy hollow as soon as the mystery had been solved.
Whoa! A wall of fire spreads around the epicenter of the impact. It burns everything in its path. The waves raised by the explosion cover large cities, and earthquakes are so strong that giant skyscrapers fall like a house of cards. So, these are the possible consequences of the collision with the first interstellar object in history to visit our solar system. We discovered it in 2017, but we're still not sure what it is: an asteroid, a comet, or a spaceship of some outer space civilization. So far, scientists have named it Oumuamua. Sounds like a Hawaiian cow. Well, whatever it is, its speed is much faster than other asteroids, about 54 miles per second. At that speed, you could cross the U.S. from coast to coast in less than 3 minutes. So this asteroid could travel from Earth to the Sun in about 2 months. By comparison, our rockets can travel up to 17,000 miles per hour. The same trip across the United States would take them about 9 minutes. So, many scientists speculate that this is an artificial object created by a very advanced civilization. Okay. The shape of the object supports this theory. It's long and narrow and resembles a spaceship. It's about half a mile long, way bigger than the Eiffel Tower. Scientists decided to see if Oumuamua was really someone's spaceship and pointed some radio telescopes at it. If the civilization on that ship had used communication or scanned us with their tech, we would have known about it. But there was complete silence. Kind of like that. Not a single radio wave. But that doesn't disprove the theory of outer space civilization. To find out for sure, we decided to determine the weight of the object. To do that, we use light. More precisely, its reflection. You see, different materials reflect light differently. We take an unknown black stone, for example. It absorbs almost all the light, reflecting almost nothing. Check out the catalog. It's charcoal. Knowing the size and material of the object, we can determine its weight. So, we need to see how much light this object reflects. And when scientists pointed their telescopes at Oumuamua, they learned that it reflects colors that match with iron and also with some solid rocks. And Oumuamua was flashing all the time, a bright flash. Then it would slowly fade, and then it would start to shine again. This means it was spinning. And it wasn't going around its axis like an arrow. It rotated chaotically, moving its edges up and down. Any artificial object or spacecraft would have been torn apart by such overloads. But Oumuamua is still intact. That means it's made of super hard materials that keep it from falling apart. And it's not hollow like a spaceship. It's one solid body. Hey, like me. The astounding speed of this object makes it pretty mysterious. Some comets can have the same or even higher speed, but they also have a kind of rocket effect. So when a spaceship starts from the launch pad, you see fire bursting out of its engines. Every second, the rocket mixes fuel with oxygen, ignites them, and ejects them at a tremendous speed. According to the laws of physics, this is like pushing off a wall. The rocket sort of jumps up from the combustion gases it throws down. That's how the rocket creates thrust and accelerates. Comets work on a similar principle. The sun's rays hit the surface of the comet. Light elements like ice start to evaporate. That gas goes one way, the comet goes the other. Just like a rocket, the comet is pushing off the evaporating gas and accelerates. This gas also forms the comet's long tail. It's as if the massive rock is dragging all this gas behind it. I can relate. Or it's like a car pulls air with it when it goes at high speed. But Oumuamua is not a comet, and it doesn't have that tail, and it doesn't have the same rocket effect as a comet. So it couldn't have accelerated to that speed. But some scientists believe that Oumuamua used to have a tail. Although we discovered it in 2017, it entered our solar system in 1995, and it was hit by the sun's rays even back then. When we discovered this asteroid, it had already lost about 95% of its mass. It simply evaporated. Other scientists believe that Oumuamua got this velocity during its birth, somewhere far away in another star system or nebula. Perhaps it was a dramatic collision of some exoplanet with another cosmic object. The colossal explosive energy of the collision threw the elongated shard into outer space. Or it could have been a supernova explosion. When a star reaches the end of its lifespan, it becomes a red giant. It's an inflated version of the star, hundreds of times bigger. Then it shrinks and explodes with tremendous force. The blast waves can travel many light years away from the epicenter, and it's one of the brightest events in the universe. So the supernova might have torn some exoplanet to pieces. One of them, Oumuamua, gained a lot of energy and speed and began its long journey toward Earth. This might explain why Oumuamua keeps spinning so wildly. But recently, scientists published a theory that Oumuamua may be a giant block of ice. The kind of ice we're used to is water, H2O, but Oumuamua could be nitrogen ice, N2. It may have remained intact in interstellar space for 500 million years. And when it arrived in our solar system, nitrogen ice could have reflected 2/3 of the sun's rays, so it didn't heat up as much. That explains why Oumuamua doesn't have a tail. You can find the same nitrogen ice on Pluto, as well as on Triton, one of Neptune's moons. So Oumuamua comes from a similar icy exoplanet. But we can find out for sure only by sending a space probe to it. Scientists came up with a plan for that called Project Lyra. The problem is that Oumuamua is leaving our solar system at tremendous speeds, much faster than our rockets can fly. And we need to catch up with this space rock as quickly as possible before it gets too far away. To do this, we can use a gravity maneuver. First, the space probe makes a flyby of Jupiter. It passes close to it to take advantage of its gravity to accelerate. After that, the probe will head towards the sun, and it'll fly around it as close as possible to fire like a catapult towards the space rock. The second option for reaching the asteroid is to use microprobes. We have to launch about 1,000 of them into orbit. They should be no heavier than a match. Each of them will have a light sail the size of a boxing ring. Then we'll focus a powerful laser beam from the ground onto this sail. It will allow us to accelerate the probe to about 20% of the speed of light. It shouldn't go too fast not to fly past the asteroid. It should be able to enter its orbit or land on it. But if we're too slow, Oumuamua will leave our solar system before we can catch up with it. It'll be a great experience because in the future, we'll be able to use such asteroids as a space taxi. All we have to do is enter the orbit of such an interstellar asteroid or even land on it. Then we would keep moving through space at incredible speeds without using any fuel at all. This would be a great option for traveling long distances or to deliver supplies to other star systems. So why should we be afraid of such objects? Well, a collision with an asteroid the size of Oumuamua could wipe out an entire state. If it were to hit somewhere in the ocean, it could cause waves taller than our skyscrapers. Scientists are anxious to find ways to protect us against such objects. One of them is ramming. If we spot a potentially hazardous object, we could send a spaceship towards it, pedal to the metal. The spacecraft will have to ram the asteroid at an angle that will move its trajectory just a little bit. Moving it too much on a cosmic scale would only dramatically change the asteroid's final destination, and we only need to get the asteroid past our planet. We can also create a controlled explosion on the asteroid. It's based on the same principle. The force of the explosion would have to shift the trajectory of the asteroid slightly, or smash a giant rock into smaller pieces. Asteroids up to 80 feet wide would burn up completely in our atmosphere due to friction against the air. Rocks between 80 feet and half a mile in size may not burn up completely and cause local damage. Anything larger is considered very hazardous. You think? The traditional method of science fiction is to put rocket engines on the asteroid. Then we can not only change the trajectory of the space rock, but also control it. And we can use it against other asteroids. It would be something like space billiards.
You have heard about Nikola Tesla. You have definitely heard about the Great Pyramids in Egypt. But what if I told you that Tesla may have probably uncovered the ancient mystery surrounding the pyramids? Wait, what? Is this a crossover episode? Nope. It's highly probable that the secrets of the pyramids are hidden in plain sight. But first, let's recap what we know about the pyramids. What's so mysterious about them? I mean, they are just old quirky buildings, aren't they? One of the biggest questions is how they were built. Some people think that the pyramids were created by people using only their hands and muscles. But others think that there might have been some kind of crazy energy source that we don't know about yet. Like, what if aliens helped out or something? Just kidding. But this idea of some unknown energy source being used to build the pyramids has been around for ages. Even in old texts, like the pyramid texts, it talks about how the gods gave us something to build a great power. So maybe there was something really powerful and mysterious going on back then? Who knows? Back in the early 1900s, he got obsessed with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. He read numerous books about these ancient structures and was blown away by how much energy they seemed to have. At that time, not many people knew much about electricity, and Tesla started to wonder if there was some kind of advanced tech hidden in the pyramids. He had an idea that the power of the pyramids had to do with electromagnetism, and he put a lot of time and effort into trying to figure out the mystery. Tesla had some pretty unusual theories about the Great Pyramids. He thought that they could actually store and move electricity, which could then be used to power up the areas around them. He also had this theory that the pyramids were built using some kind of crystal energy. He believed that the chambers inside the pyramids could have these super powerful crystals that could control the electromagnetic fields. But that's not all. Tesla also had this idea that the materials used to make the pyramids had properties that allowed them to trap energy from the sun and the moon. And not just a little bit of energy. He thought that the pyramid could actually create this massive energy field that could light up whole cities or even brighten up dark places. He thought that the pyramids could be used as giant power plants to generate electricity and run machines. Tesla even believed that the pyramids were somehow linked to cosmic energy, which could be used for spiritual enlightenment and healing. How very new age of him. Anyway, Tesla wasn't just pulling these ideas out of thin air. He was seriously into studying everything he could about the pyramids, from ancient artifacts and texts to hieroglyphs and drawings. And he came up with this idea that the pyramids were designed to be energy amplifiers, and some kind of unknown energy source was used during their construction. Some people thought Tesla was eccentric for coming up with these theories, but his ideas have actually had a huge impact on the way we think about the pyramids today. Researchers and scholars have been digging into his theories for years and using them to uncover some of the biggest mysteries surrounding these ancient structures. For example, recently scientists have used theoretical physics to investigate how the Great Pyramid of Egypt would react to certain radio waves. They found out that if the radio waves were a certain length, the pyramid could concentrate the energy inside its rooms and focus it under its base. The scientists did lots of calculations to figure this out. They first thought about what radio wavelengths would work best. Then they made a model of how the pyramid would react to the waves. They figured out how much of the energy from the waves would get absorbed or spread out. Lastly, they checked how the energy would move around inside the pyramid when the waves hit it. To help explain all of this, the scientists used something called multipole analysis. This is when you take a complicated object and break it down into simpler parts. Then you can see how each part interacts with the energy that's coming in. It's like taking apart a puzzle to see how each piece fits together. The researchers are interested in how all of this can be used in the future. They want to make really tiny particles that can do the same thing as the pyramid, but with light. By changing the size, shape, and the material of these particles, they can control how the light moves around them. This can be really useful for things like making tiny sensors or super efficient solar cells. The scientists had to make some guesses when they were doing their research. They assumed that there weren't any hidden spaces inside the pyramid, and that the material used to build it was all the same. But even with these guesses, they still made some pretty impressive discoveries. But the pyramid study is not the only proof that Tesla was ahead of his time. There are more Tesla's projects that seemed unrealistic at the time, but that scientists and enthusiasts reevaluate and try to implement today. Let's talk about Tesla's most ambitious project, the Wardenclyffe Transmission Tower. Back in 1900, Tesla was already a big shot when it came to electrical engineering in America. People were blown away by his amazing inventions and the fact that he managed to outdo Thomas Edison in the battle of currents. However, Tesla wasn't content to rest on his laurels. He decided to embark on his most ambitious project yet, the transmission tower at Wardenclyffe. It was built between 1901 and 1905, and it was based on one of Tesla's breakthrough ideas. He had a vision to make the impossible possible by creating a global wireless communication system. It would use Earth itself as a conductor, transmitting music, news, stock market reports, secured military communications, and even facsimile images. Does it sound familiar? Right, it sounds just like the internet that we use today, only without the use of any wires. But Tesla had a much bigger dream in mind, to transmit power wirelessly. He already proved that high-frequency signals could be sent without any wires using his Tesla coil transformers, and this sparked his obsession with wireless energy transmission. His vision was to not only transform the way we communicate, but also to find a way to transfer power currents globally by tapping into the Earth's natural energy. Tesla believed that there was an abundance of free energy all around us that could be used for humanity's benefit. In 1899, he conducted some top-secret experiments and got convinced that it was possible to transmit electrical power through the Earth's upper atmosphere. This is actually how the Wardenclyffe Tower was created. It was supposed to be the prototype station for a network of towers all over the globe that would provide the whole world with wireless energy. Unfortunately, Tesla didn't have the resources or the patience of his investors to bring this project to fruition. It ran into all sorts of financial problems and roadblocks, and in 1917, the unfinished tower was finally torn down for scrap metal to pay off Tesla's mounting debts. Now it remains a sad reminder that even the greatest minds can sometimes fall short of their dreams. The original red brick laboratory, however, is still there, and it is the only Tesla lab that has survived. Fun fact, in 2017, a film crew made a crazy discovery. They used ground-penetrating radar to explore the area around Wardenclyffe, and they found a whole series of tunnels stretching for hundreds of feet underneath the site. Nobody knows exactly what these tunnels were used for, but people have been speculating for years that they were part of Tesla's grand plan. Wardenclyffe, of course, is a major landmark for Tesla enthusiasts from all over the world. Who knows? Maybe someone will finally crack the mystery of the tunnels one day. But even if they don't, the legacy of Tesla and his amazing ideas lives on.